Hey there, we have a live head-to-head points mock draft, but first, it's our first Kokomo Friday of 2023.
Ooh.
Enjoy.
Alcantara, Soroka, you look so good in Boca. Peralta, Manoa, bounce back for Aarondola. Giolito, Castillo, Yoshida, Wilson, Carlo, and Votto. Value so high, but ADP so low. Frank Love's hip some kind of Joe. Now let's get on with the show.
That's right. Happy Kokomo Friday. Let's do a live mock draft, shall we? Welcome into Fantasy Baseball today on February 3rd. Frank Stampfl joined by all of the peeps, every single one of them. Scott White, Chris Towers, Chris the Welsh. Scotty, are you ready to draft?
I am.
Well, you know what? I probably should have told you beforehand that your microphone was not connected.
Oh, wait. We were talking for like...
I had like 10 minutes to tell you, and I was just spaced out. I was working on a bunch of different things. If people are wondering the Kokomo Friday theme, yes, I still do love Connor Joe, even though he's on the Pittsburgh Pirates. Chris, hello there. It looks like you're ready for a hockey draft.
I don't know why I decided to throw on my Panthers jersey. I needed to change my shirt right before the show, and this is what I picked out. So, yeah, that's wearing an old school Florida Panthers jersey. Let's go Panthers.
Hey, it's pretty swaggy. Works for me. Welsh, head-to-head points. Nice little prep for our Tout Wars League. How you doing?
Doing very good, my friend. I feel like I should have wore a football jersey in honor of this baseball draft just to like really fix it in and mix it in a little bit. But I'm ready to do a little bit of a drafty draft here on the points. And by the way, I am not in that one because I can't travel to New York, unfortunately. So wah, wah. I am still in Tout. I'm doing a different Tout, but I have been replaced because of my lack of ability to leave Arizona to go to New York. I'm very sad to lose to you for a third straight time.
Oh, well, thanks.
Are you in the online draft, the 15-team mixed online draft?
Yeah. It's the
Wait,
like
so
yeah.
you're me.
One of the online auction. I don't know which one it is. I don't even know, but I am. Maybe you and I are in that one, Scott.
This is professional podcasting, Scott. Your mic is still not plugged in.
Yeah, well, I mean, we should have really done this before we going live because I have no idea what's wrong with it. Everything looks like it's plugged in fine.
Unprofessional, Scott.
Yeah, well, no, it's not Scott's fault. It's actually completely my fault. But anyway, I'm going to kind of prep things up, and Scott will figure it out. I have no doubt in him. Before we start, here's what we've got going on today. A live 12-team head-to-head points mock draft, and we're all spread out throughout the draft. The Welsh is picking first overall. Scott is picking fourth. Towers is eighth, and I am last. 12th overall in the draft. Womp. Womp. Again, this is a head-to-head points league, and we're using the CBS Sports standard scoring system. 1 point for a single, 2 points for a double, 3 points for a triple, 4 points for a home run.
You don't have to do the whole thing.
Yeah, I thought about going through all of it, but I'm like, it just doesn't make sense. So anyway, it's a head-to-head points league. Shallower starting lineups. So we've got one of each infield position, 3 starting outfielders, 1 utility bat, no corner infielder or middle infielder. We've got 5 starting pitchers, 2 relief pitchers, and then 5 bench spots. So not as deep of a draft that you might be used to, but nonetheless, it's going to be a fun one. Before we start, heads up that starting next week, we'll have 5 podcasts per week in the month of February. Position previews starting up next week, and we will have a mailbag that comes out every Friday. So we'll have 4 position previews, and then the mailbag. That'll basically be our setup for the first 3 weeks of February. If you have a question, you can email it in at fantasybaseball@cbsi.com or drop a question with a 5-star Apple Podcast review. Scotty, third time's a charm. Let's see.
How's it picking me up?
Yeah, there we go.
All
Good to
right,
go.
unplugging and plugging. It's that always works.
All right, so we are good to start it up here. For those watching us live on YouTube, you'll be able to follow along with the draft board. Of course, we'll keep you up to date on all the picks that are happening. We'll talk through some strategy, some maybe, player debates. Why'd you take this player over this player, so on and so forth. And then at the end of this thing, we'll kind of recap everyone's team. And it's going to go a little bit longer, so just a heads up there. On the podcast side, this will be a 2-part podcast, so just keep that in mind. Scott, we're good to go, bud.
All right, I'm going to hit the start button. And the Welsh is up first with the number 1 pick. He gets to make the decision that everybody is going to criticize fiercely.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's points. I think the obvious play feels like a pitcher. The other obvious play might be take a good contact hitter like Jose Ramirez, who has projected the highest points on CBS. And the probably most openly critical play is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to take Aaron Judge, the guy that got the most points last year, over 700 points, and is still projected, even with a huge windfall of decreased windfall of production this year, is still my guy. And I'm going to go with Aaron Judge with my number one overall pick in this points one. The three outfielders made me question it a little bit, but I'm going to stick with it.
Yeah, no criticism from this group. I know Frank and I have him number one as well. Chris, do you have him number one for this?
Yes, I do.
Format.
Okay, good.
All right,
good.
it's unanimous.
Look at me. Well liked. Perfect. Always what I wanted.
Yeah, I think it's absolutely a great call there. Over 700 points in head-to-head points leagues last year over on CBS. Sandy Alcantara was the next closest player to him, and he was 90 points behind. So just far and away better than anybody else. The next two picks after that, Yordan Alvarez. All right, a little bit of surprise there, but I think it could make some sense in this format, given the home runs, the plate discipline. He's awesome. And then Jose Ramirez goes third overall, and Scott, you are up.
Ooh. Yeah. By the way, I think Yordan Alvarez would be my third pick. I'd take Jose Ramirez over him, but Alvarez and Judge, like, they were 1 and 2 in basically all the quality of contact metrics for Statcast, like every single one, and they were a distant 1 and 2. So I think Yordan Alvarez is closer to Judge than he gets credit for. I'm gonna go Juan Soto here.
Ooh.
I have at one point ranked Mookie Betts ahead, and Mookie Betts, of course, a great points player as well, doesn't strike out much, but Soto was pretty disappointing last year, and yet because he walks 40 times more than he strikes out, he was, even with the disappointment, he was the 7th best outfielder in points leagues. So, I feel like obviously I'm expecting a bounce back from him, but the floor is pretty high for him in this format. It's hard to go wrong.
In case anyone saw that Yordan Alvarez pick and they were like, whoa, what's going on there? 3.79 fantasy points per game last year. That was second most among outfielders, behind only Aaron Judge. So definitely makes sense in this format. After Scott took Juan Soto, we see Ronald Acuna, Mookie Betts, and Shohei Ohtani off the board. Ohtani's a little bit tougher in a head-to-head points league because I don't know that he's going to play as much. He should. And obviously
it's kind of suspect.
Yeah, and you have to make that decision of whether he's going to be a pitcher or a batter, at least in this format for CBS. And Chris, you are on the clock with the 8th overall pick.
Yeah, and this is the spot where I do have Trey Turner as my top player available, and I'm probably going to take him. But like we talked about in the outfield preview, doing that with shortstop, especially in this format where you only have one shortstop spot in your lineup, I'm going to reach a point in like the 6th round where like 7 of my top 8 ranked players are all going to be shortstops, and it's going to be really tough to like manage the draft from that point on. So I may have to rethink ranking Trey Turner as high as I do. It's an interesting conundrum.
Could have gone Julio instead. Julio still hasn't gone.
Yeah.
Scott, come on. No name dropping, because I'm picking 12th here. I'd love to get Julio Rodriguez. He does fall a little bit more in this format because steals don't matter as much, and he struck out a little bit more than you would like to see last year. It doesn't walk all that much either. So
did you think not in the top 10? Isn't that a little bit of a surprise?
I think he probably should be around there, somewhere in the 8 to 10 range. I don't know exactly where I have him. Oh, there he goes. He just went 10th overall. But I would have loved to get him at 12. I'm kind of at a disadvantage here because for those watching on YouTube, it's my draft board that's showing up. So if I put players in the queue, obviously Scott's going to draft all of them and say, oh, I wasn't looking at your screen.
I'm not, because you're an ant on my screen, but also B, you can't just like claim a player 5 picks ahead of time because, I put him in my queue. Like,
sure, I can.
No, you can't.
I like the idea that like if you queue them, you own them now. So Frank wins. You're up.
So I am on the clock here. One of the picks is going to be Kyle Tucker. I'm going to let it kind of scroll down a little bit here so I can figure out what I want to do with my second pick. Interesting. Head-to-head points. Every year we talk about how important it is to get elite starting pitching, yet no pitchers are going to go in the first round. And it's going to be interesting to see how long they last, specifically in this format.
That's because it's no longer that important to get elite starting pitching.
I think you still want a good amount of pitching in a head-to-head points league, but I agree, Scott. I think you could probably wait until the third or even the fourth round to get your first starting pitcher. I'm getting the little bleep sound in my chat, even though I shut the sound off. So I don't know why.
Me too. I know.
So not great there. I took Kyle Tucker at 12, and I think I'm going to take a third baseman here. It appears I have Austin Riley ranked ahead of Rafael Devers. I think I need to change that. So I'm going to go ahead and take Rafael Devers, but I'm going to have to change up my rankings because I really like Austin Riley, but he strikes out a little bit more. Obviously, Devers is a little bit more proven. So I go Kyle Tucker and Devers at the turn. Julio Rodriguez went at 10. Manny Machado went at 11. And then the second pick of round 2 was Mike Trout.
Frank, I got to tell you, I don't mean to jump in here, but like, I get what you said about pitching, but this is still points and there are still gaps. I am shocked. Way too big of a play up that I had about, oh, pitching could be first. We've got 15 picks and there's no pitcher. And there goes the first one at 16. That I am shocked about in this format.
There is one pitcher that I think is worth drafting in the first round in this format, and it wasn't the one who just went here, Garrett Cole. I won't reveal who I...
Is it this one?
It's not Corbin Burns either, Chris. Who you just,
Interesting. It's Justin Verlander, your number one pick.
No. Justin Verlander is my number one in 5x5 leagues, but it's okay. It's Sandy Alcantara. Okay. Just because the guy piles on innings unlike any other pitcher. He had half of his starts were more than 7 innings, not 7 innings or more than 7 innings, half of them. And innings are huge in this format. We're 3 points apiece. So that's the only pitcher this year, given the scarcities among the hitter ranks, that I'd be willing to invest a late first round pick in.
All right, let's catch everybody up on what is happening. Again, I took Devers, and Trout was the next pick after that. Then Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Garrett Cole, Corbin Burns, Fernando Tatis, and Sandy Alcantara. So we've got 3 pitchers now in the second round. And Welsh, I hear you. I know it's a head-to-head points league, but something I think you need to consider, as in every draft this year, is that they're just going a little bit later than usual. And it seems to be that there's more quantity of close to elite level pitchers that are viable, that you can trust. So I don't really mind waiting until the 3-4 turn to get my first pitcher, because I'm confident I'm still going to get at least one really, really good pitcher, and maybe I'll choose to double down at that point.
I guess just the tried and true has always been, stack starting pitching, get lots in pitching and lots of pitching. And you're right, it has pooled out. That doesn't change the traditional, like, I'm just surprised in 15 picks we didn't get one starting pitcher in there. But you're right, it is following a little bit. It's actually following a little bit more of like a categories platform, not like a roto, but more like a head-to-head categories play, which is, I find it interesting.
All right, after Sandy Alcantara went, Nolan Arenado is off the board. Scott, you have 3 seconds to make a pick.
2.
Yeah, I'm going to pick Austin Riley. I'm going to follow what I always say, and normally we're talking 5x5 leagues, but what I always say is my plan for this year. Ideally, outfield, third base, second base with my first 3 picks. So I do, like, the first few players available in my rankings were pitchers. So I'm kind of disappointed that people aren't plucking those guys out and leaving me all the hitters. But I'm going to stick to what my plan is and take Austin Riley here. With the 21st overall pick.
One thing that I will point out is just like, it's not a bad idea when the consensus is to push pitchers down. It's not necessarily a bad idea to go the opposite direction. And it's nothing more than just, if everyone is drafting in one way, or 9 of the 12 people in your league are drafting with one thought process in mind, that means that you have to draft a better version of a team than 9 other people who are doing the same thing as you. Whereas if you zig when everybody else is zagging, you potentially have the opportunity to build a team where you have less competition for the types of players you're looking for at given points in the draft. So if everyone's looking at hitting early on, you're going to get your choice of the best pitchers early on. And then later on, when everybody's looking for their pitchers, you're going to have your choice of the best hitters. So there's some value just in that thought process, and that's true in every type of fantasy league.
I don't think we're there yet, though, with the pitchers. Like, you can't reason. I just took Austin Riley in round 2 ahead of a bunch of pitchers, like I said, but you can't reasonably expect to get Austin Riley in round 3.
No,
regardless
that's
of the
not.
scoring format.
That's not what I mean. It's not you can get Austin Riley. It's you're passing up, yes, the higher level hitters, but when everyone else in round 5 starts to look for their pitchers, you're going to have your choice of the best hitters available.
But you won't have any good hitters left to draft.
Yeah.
And that's the scarcer position. Like, there's more differentiation within the hitter ranks than the pitcher ranks.
I think that's probably true. But I still think there's value in just shopping in a different pool than everyone else.
And that's actually what I just did. I just kind of did. Like, I wanted to double tap pitching. I really wanted Paul Goldschmidt, and Raymond absolutely tore my heart out, stepped on it, and threw it in the garbage. And I was going to go with one pitcher, but I decided to double tap two. There are actually 3 pitchers I love here: Verlander, McClanahan, and a pitcher that hasn't gone. And I decided to tap 2 elite pitchers in here because I do think that the gaps positionally fall off a little bit, but points also pushes up so many other hitters that are irrelevant. So I kind of push back a little bit, like that the hitters start to really stink. They don't. Like, I'm going to have an advantage on SPs, I think, now. And there's plenty of other depth. I mean, Bobby Witt's still out there, and Bobby Witt is not a 2-round player. Like, those are the type of guys that are still going to drop in points. So I'm kind of going with exactly what Towers was talking about.
But Bobby Witt is less valuable in this format.
Yeah. No, I agree.
I mean,
I'm still saying it's a higher level playing field at the middle. The higher tiers are still the higher tiers, but those middle tiers where we talk about like category positional stuff, those kind of stink, and we're like, oh my God, second base falls off. But the middles are deeper, and there's a lot more players in them that get pushed up.
And the argument for years why we've, advocated for taking starting pitching early in this format and head-to-head points is that it's a shallower league. So the waiver wire is better. So it's easier to find hitters that you could stream and good matchups. And then hopefully, you just find a couple of hitters that break out. It's just easier to find those guys either in the mid to late rounds or on the waiver wire in a league this shallow.
To put some numbers on it, there are probably more pitchers. If you look at last year's production in particular, there are more pitchers. There are 13 players left who scored 500 points last year. 3 of them were hitters. So there are probably more hitters who are going to give you 450 points, but there are fewer pitchers, or there are fewer hitters who can give you 500 plus, I guess would be the way to put it.
Yeah. Apologies for anyone listening or watching. If you hear that little pop sound, it's the chat. Someone's writing in the chat, and I shut off the volume in the draft, so I don't know what's going on. But
I got it too.
I apologize for that. Let's just catch people up. After Scott took Austin Riley in round 2, we've had a bunch of picks. Pete Alonso, Paul Goldschmidt went right before Welsh. I saw his reaction at the time. So Welsh, feel free to just yell out and do do on the ITL podcast. Just don't curse, because that's
I know.
And then you double tap Justin Verlander and Shane O'Mac.
Here comes the money.
Here we go. Money talk.
Here comes the money.
After you took McClanahan, we see Max Scherzer, Aaron Nola. So quite the pitching run. Scott took Jose Altuve. Finally, he's done it. An outfielder, third baseman, a second baseman. Finally.
I had to do it. I had to. There was kind of a pitcher I wanted there, but it's like, this is my chance to get a second baseman in the 3rd round finally. The thing I say is most important to do in drafts, so I had to do it.
You finally got it. And then after Altuve, we see Jacob deGrom go, Marcus Semien, Spencer Strider, who is SPARP eligible. He has relief pitcher eligibility as a starting pitcher, and he's basically a cheat code in this format if you play on CBS. So keep that in mind. And then, Chris, you get your SP1, and it is...
That's my SP2.
Oh, your SP2.
Yeah, I went Corbin Burns in the 2nd round, then Carlos Rodon in the 3rd round. And this is what I was talking about, where when I was picking, my top 3 players left were all shortstops. And it's either take a shortstop or take that second starting pitcher. And I'd rather take a second starting pitcher than use a utility spot. And I didn't want to go with one of the other positions. So that's kind of where I am. And I am going to have to kind of dig deep in my rankings and make some adjustments to push some shortstops down, I think, the way these drafts are going.
It's interesting to me that you took Carlos Rodon over Brandon Woodruff and Zach Wheeler, who seem like several of the pitcher picks going, Aaron Nola going ahead of them.
Woodruff is not really the innings eater type. That's the one knock on him in this format in particular, is I don't know if he's ever topped 180 innings.
He has.
In a major league season, he usually is just under 6 innings per start. I think the one exception might have been in 2020, the shortened season. So in this format, I think Rodon's ability to rack up strikeouts and wins on what should be a better Yankees team than the Brewers, I think is what differentiates him. I have him ranked higher in both formats, Rodon than Woodruff. But in this format, I think the innings concerns for Woodruff, obviously Rodon has his own innings concerns, but they were very close last year in innings. And so I think Rodon is the better choice. I just think he's the better pitcher.
After Chris took Carlos Rodon, we saw Bo Bichette, Brandon Woodruff, Zach Wheeler. So again, this round featured 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 starting pitchers in round 3, which brings me to my 2 picks at the turn. I took Julio Urias and Francisco Lindor. I would have wanted to take another starting pitcher. Kevin Gausman, I had a little bit lower down the rankings. I could have pulled them up just to make sure I get him at the turn, but I think this is a good learning lesson here because I probably should have taken at least one starting pitcher with my first 2 picks. Just knowing what I know now, I wish there was better options here at this point.
Although, if you had done that, Julio Urias wouldn't have been there at the third.
Yeah, that is fair. So I only have one starting pitcher through 4 rounds in a head-to-head points league, and that's not normal for me. So let's see how this team ultimately turns out. I took Urias and I took Francisco Lindor. Some people might be wondering, Lindor over Bobby Witt Jr.? It's the 4th round and Bobby Witt hasn't gone. Last year, Lindor 3.21 fantasy points per game. Bobby Witt Jr. 2.91. So even if you think he's going to get better, this really is not his best format. Much better in a categories league.
Yeah, what I was going to say earlier was same head-to-head points per game last year for Bobby Witt as Dansby Swanson. So, sub 300 on base percentage. Just really, really poor plate discipline from him, and that drags him down in this format.
After I took Lindor, we see Matt Olson, Shane Bieber, and Kyle Schwarber off the board. And Chris, you are up with 3 seconds.
I hate it.
What? Wow.
Got my 3rd starting pitcher. I'm experimenting here, but I took Dylan Cease there, so went with 3 starting pitchers in my first 4 picks. I'm just going to see what it looks like. I'm going to see how it makes me feel because, again, top players on my board, other than the starting pitcher, were shortstops or Michael Harris, who I'm not totally in love with. So I'm going to see what it looks like to go this heavy at starting pitcher. I mean, frankly, I'm probably not going to take a starting pitcher for a while now. But this approach does give me the flexibility to, avoid what has historically been the worst range for starting pitchers, which is like the round 4 to 8 to 10. You typically, I've done a lot of research on this. You typically get the worst return on investment from pitchers in that range. So I think there's I'm interested to see how it turns out.
And eventually there's going to be another run, Chris, where pitchers go. And as a result, some hitters are going to fall to you. So you'll have that luxury to take them at that point. After you took Dylan Cease, we see Corey Seager go off the board. And Chris, you mentioned Michael Harris. And I think this is a good point, along with Bobby Witt Jr. Michael Harris is going to be likely awesome in a categories or a roto league. The power, the speed combination. But what you need to consider, at least with the CBS scoring format, you lose points for strikeouts and walks matter. So plate discipline is huge. Someone like Michael Harris does get dinged a little bit in this format. Also names like Randy Arozarena, you'll see go a little bit later, maybe around 4, around 5 picks. So in case you're wondering why these guys are lasting so late into the draft, that is the reason why. And with that said, we see Alek Manoah and Framber Valdez. Scott, you are on the clock and you do not have a starting pitcher yet.
Yeah, I think this is the time to take one because we're getting toward the end of the second tier, the near elite. We did starting pitcher tiers on our most recent podcast. I was hoping Alek Manoah would make it to me. He went 2 picks before me. So I'm going to take Max Fried. And he's one of 5 pitchers I have left in this tier, but he's the one that I have the most confidence in. I may grab another one on the way back. We'll see who's there. Interestingly enough, Ozzy Albies is still here. And remember, I took Jose Altuve. Well, I just wanted to say, like, if I had known Ozzy Albies would make it back to me in round 4, then I would have taken Spencer Strider with that last pick. But there's no way. of
Everyone
knowing.
be quiet. Everyone be very, very. Don't move. Nobody move. Nobody make a sound. I'm 2 picks away, and you're right. Ozzy and Bobby Witt just went. I would have considered Bobby Witt on this turn, as much as everybody hates him in points leagues. There's still a lot of homers. I believe in progression. I believe in, I believe in him actually improving this year, and the strikeouts can dip a little bit. This is just a good value if I were to get him in the 4th or 5th. So that was a good pick right there. That would have been one of my backup plans.
And I agree
But it
with you
didn't
too.
happen.
Even with the plate discipline, I think that's probably a little bit too late for Bobby Witt, just considering
Yes.
what his upside is. Scott took Max Fried, as he mentioned. Some people might be listening or watching and they think, wow, that's kind of early for Framber Valdez. I never see him go in the 4th round. This is his preferred format. So
Yes.
you get bonus points for quality starts. Last year, Framber Valdez set the MLB record with 25 straight quality starts. So he is exceptional in this format in head-to-head points. And after Bobby Witt goes, Yu Darvish is off the board, and Welsh,
Worked out perfectly for you.
we're back up.
Yeah, I was now I will say in categories, I mentioned this on the show before. I like Jazz this year. I like him a lot. But with strikeouts and stolen bases not mattering as much, I don't need to go crazy. And I think Ozzy is actually a much better choice here. So at a not deep position, I'm gonna swoop in and take Ozzy Albies with the 48th pick. And this is one of those guys that bumps up in points leagues. He scored almost 500 points last year. The position absolutely tanks after this, especially if you look at projections. I'm going to go with Alex Bregman. Again, I don't love him, but plate patience is going to be better. I don't need stolen bases. That's not a thing. He's a shoe-in for 450 to 500. I mean, in projections, just to let everybody know, on CBS at third base, there are 2 players left that score 400 points. The difference between Alex Bregman and the third player is almost 100 points.
Yeah.
Projections, blah, blah, blah. But still, Alex Bregman, pretty consistent here. This position stinks after this. I did want to go pitcher, letting everybody know, but I'm going to take my 2nd and my 3rd baseman with the 4th and 5th round.
Here's the question about Albies, and I think it's a really, really important one in this format in particular. Where do we think he's going to bat? Because volume is king in a points league. And, Albies, when he's at his best, has been batting high in the lineup. He's been racking up a lot of runs. He's not someone who necessarily gets on base a ton. He's got, at his best, he hits for decent power, but I think he might be one of those guys who the deadened ball hurt. And if he's hitting 6th, I think Roster Resource has him, that's a 15% decline in projected plate appearances from batting 2nd.
I'm guessing he'll bat between he'll bat between 2nd and 6th, and it'll move around a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the opportunity for him to bat 2, because remember before he went through those struggles and Dansby took over hitting in that 2 spot, that was his to own. Michael Harris has got more strikeout questions. Obviously, he made an absolute everything he possibly could out of last year in the contact. But if there are struggles, I just don't know that you're going to lock him in. Plus, there's a little bit of advantage having a switch hitter at 2 in how you're batting and lefty righties throughout the game going. So I don't know. I think Scott's right, but I would lean more 2 than anything else.
It's a big question for him.
Yeah, I know that's why some people have been fading Ozzy Albies. They're kind of worried about the lineup. I think it might be related to splits too. I know he's much better against left-handed pitching, so maybe he bats 2nd against lefties with Harris sliding down, and then against righties he's batting 6th. But then that would mean the majority of his plate appearances are coming batting 6th, so that would not be great for his value. At the turn, we mentioned Welch took Albies and Bregman. Bregman was a fantastic pick in this format. JT Real Muto goes, then Luis Castillo, and Scott, you are about to make your 5th pick, which was blank.
Kevin Gausman.
Nice.
So remember when I took Fried last round, I said there were 5 pitchers left in that tier. Well, with this next pick after the turn, there were 2 pitchers left in that tier, Gausman and Gallen for me. And, Framber Valdez was already gone from the next tier. Could argue he belongs in this tier as well, especially in this format. But I wanted to go ahead and take one. And I still feel like Fried and Gausman's a really good top of the rotation. I wanted to talk about Bregman just to put numbers on it, to show how big of a difference plate discipline makes in this format, because Austin Riley was my third baseman. I took him in round 2. He only outscored Bregman by like 10 points last year. And, if you're talking a 5-by-5 league, you wouldn't draft Bregman anywhere near the same vicinity as Riley. Like, they'd be 5-6 rounds apart probably. But, Riley coming off a great near MVP season and Bregman coming off with one of the worst seasons of his career, only 10 points difference.
Yeah, I think that's a great call with Alex Bregman. As we mentioned, awesome plate discipline, and definitely helps his value in this format. After Scott took Kevin Gausman, which that was actually my top ranked pitcher at the time when I took Julio Urias, after Urias. So if I was going to take another pitcher, it was going to be him, but felt a little bit early with the first pick of round 4. So that's why I held off on Kevin Gausman. Jazz Chisholm goes, George Springer, and then Zach Gallen. Chris, you are back up in round 5. You have 3 starting pitchers and only 1 hitter.
Yeah, it's a weird spot for me to be in. I'm definitely going to take a hitter here. I'm kind of agonizing. I was hoping Jazz Chisholm would fall to me. He did not, so I'm going to go with a little bit of an upside play in Luis Robert.
All right. Luis Robert has a ton of upside, as you mentioned, Chris. He just has to stay on the field. It's been a huge issue for him to this point, but he's got some power. He's got a little bit of speed. He makes a lot of contact the past couple of years too, so that's something
he needs to play better than he did last year, though. Like that's I mean, it's true across the board, but like if he's not as good as he was 2 years ago, it doesn't really matter if he stays healthy that much, because he's not going to be a particularly useful player in this format. But obviously if you just average the last 2 seasons, he gets you where you need to be.
And something, wow. All right, well, I don't have a second baseman. I was like, I'll get Max Muncy in like 5 rounds from now. He just went at the end of round 5, so I will not be drafting Max Muncy after Chris took Luis Robert, Edwin Diaz, and of course, Muncy went as well. And it's coming up on my pick. I have 3 hitters. I have 1 starting pitcher in Julio Urias, and I probably need to double tap starting pitchers, even though I have a bunch of hitters here ranked over my starting pitchers. And man, there's one hitter here that I really want to take too, but I just can't chance it. I've got to load up on some pitchers here. So I'm going to go ahead and take my top ranked starter right now, which is Christian Javier. And
I almost took him before, like on that last turn. If Bregman hadn't been there, I probably would have taken Javier and Albies.
And the other pick that I'm going to make is Joe Musgrove. So, waiting a little bit, I don't mind this actually. Through 6 rounds, I have 3 hitters. I've got 3 starters. I've got Julio Urias, Christian Javier, and Joe Musgrove. Yeah, I think you'd like it to be a little bit better, but not bad. I think it's all right the way it worked out. Let's see the way that the rest of the team turns out here. After Musgrove went, Logan Gilbert, Robbie Ray, Emmanuel Clase. Another difference that you'll notice head-to-head points versus categories is that elite closers, they don't matter as much. They're still useful in this format, but not as useful as they are in a categories league. So they typically do go a little bit later. And Chris Towers, you are back on the clock.
I am back on the clock. And yeah, the elite closers, this is probably around the right time for them. If you look at the points that they scored last year, Edwin Diaz was like 450-ish. That's probably what you should expect from most of the players who are being taken now. So this is the right spot for them. Although you only need 2 of them, it's a 12-team league. There should be, in theory, 30 closers at any given time. There won't be, but there could be. I'm going to take another outfielder here, and I was down to either Cedric Mullins or Randy Arozarena. I went with Cedric Mullins, and the thought process there is mostly just, I think we all agree last year was a disappointment for Cedric Mullins. I don't know necessarily if you guys all think he's going to bounce back. I think he can be better than he was last season. And he actually was only outscored by 4 points by Randy Arozarena in this format last season. So I give Mullins a little bit of an edge there. Stolen bases don't matter a ton individually, but you do get 2 points per stolen base. You lose 1 for a caught stealing. I think Cedric Mullins, a pretty good bet to make up whatever he loses as a hitter to a Arozarena with some steals. So that's where I'm going there.
The only thing that worries me a tad bit with Cedric Mullins is he was really bad against left-handed pitching last year, to the point where he was getting benched against some lefties. So I hope that won't happen again, but I think there's a chance at least that it can happen. So obviously that would affect his volume output in terms of plate appearances in this format. After Cedric Mullins, Gunnar Henderson, which, as we know, is really that last third baseman, and before we see that huge drop off. Vinny Pasquantino, which it's early, but this probably is his better format in a head-to-head points league. Logan Webb and Scott, you are back up. I believe you have 2 starting pitchers at this point.
Yes, I do. I think I'm going to take a third because I'm looking at the hitters that are left, and I just feel like it's a lot of redundancies at every position where I have need. I mean, this is the advantage of, oh, great, I already have second base filled, I already have third base filled. Outfield week 2, and I already only have one of those, but yeah, I don't see a clear stand.
Robo Scott.
Yeah, Scott, your connection is kind of lagging a little bit here. So maybe jump out and jump back in, and then we'll get your thoughts on the picks there. Right. Scott took Tristan McKenzie, and just before that, we saw Logan Webb go, and the aforementioned Vinny Pasquantino. We are coming up on the Welsh's 6 and 7 turn here, 6-7 turn, and let's check in and see what the Welsh has got going on. Got Jose Nope, that's Scott's team. That would not make sense. Chris Welsh, there he is. Ozzy Albies, Alex Bregman, Aaron Judge, and then you've got the 2 starting pitchers, Verlander and McClanahan. So, what are you thinking between starting pitcher versus hitter here at this point?
Yeah, I mean, I gotta get a pitcher, at least one. I don't like them anymore, which is a major problem that I'm gonna have to deal with. That they're not good, and there are still some good hitters, but it's one of those things I can't go back and take away any of the picks. Eloy was someone I was looking at. Tristan McKenzie was someone I was looking at. So this is going to make it pretty tough. And Kyle Wright was someone I was looking at. So I'm up. I don't want to. I've talked about outfield and how bad it gets. But in this format, there's still some pretty good players. But I have a hard time passing up Randy Arozarena, who Towers was talking about. So I think I'm going to go pitcher and I'm going to just take Randy just to get that done. So we're going to take a second hitter. And
that is the hitter I would have taken if I took one instead of McKenzie.
Yeah, and he's not the highest projected person on the board, but I think, we all agree he's earned the spot. The stolen bases will be there. He's going to get lots of hits. There's power, runs, 5 tools. The pitcher's a little bit tougher. Like I said, I don't particularly love any of the names. I'm kind of deciding between 2 oldies here, Clayton Kershaw and Bassett. I think I'm going to go with Kershaw just simply for the win factor here. I might get a few more innings pitched out of Bassett, but I'm going to go with Kershaw here.
Yeah, no, I think thinking about wins and a team that a pitcher is on makes a lot of sense too. Kyle Wright, we just saw go again a little bit earlier, 6th round. He had 21 wins last year, and I think you get 7 points for a win in this format. So they are incredibly important. I think that's something that you should be in the back of your mind when you're just differentiating factors. Splitting hairs, you probably want a pitcher on a good team. So Welsh goes there and takes Clayton Kershaw. And then the second pick of round 7 is a great points league player as well. Wander Franco to go at this point. He doesn't walk all that much, but he doesn't strike out. So he's not losing those points.
I was really hopeful somehow, everyone's getting their shortstops. There's lots of guys, people worrying about pitching and stuff. He would be able to come swoop back around because he's not super exciting, but hopes were dashed. Hopes were gone.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Wander Franco, indeed a standout in this format. All right, Scotty, let's hope that we don't have Robo Scott anymore, and you're on the clock.
Hopefully not.
We get the thoughts on your previous pick, which was Tristan McKenzie, and whoever else you're about to take.
Yeah, just like I was saying, I felt like there were a lot of redundancies within the hitter ranks, a lot of shortstops that are similar value, a lot of outfielders that were similar value. I already have second and third base covered. That's where you're really having to stretch at this point in the draft. A lot of catchers that are similar value. Like my top 3 ranked players right now are all catchers, but it's a deep tier, and so I don't want to be one of the first to dip into it, especially since in these one catcher leagues sometimes they get passed over for a long time. So because Wander Franco was taken 2 picks ago, I'm worried a shortstop run is coming up. I'm worried that, well, it looks like a bunch of redundancies now. I could get left out completely. So I'm going to take the one who I think is best suited for this scoring format, and that's Xander Bogaerts, another good plate discipline guy. And I don't have to worry about a shortstop run now.
I really like that pick. That's where I was thinking about going as well with this last one. Same exact worry that you said too. You said it really well. The fear of a run happening, especially when you're 10 to 15 picks through and there's about 5 guys to pick from, it's not good. It's not great. And I'm with Scott there.
And I know we have some concerns about Bogaerts leaving Fenway, which is such a great ballpark for right-handed hitters and specifically for batting average. But something I was thinking about, the top half of this Padres lineup could be ridiculous. If everyone is healthy, Fernando Tatis, Juan Soto, Manny Machado, Xander Bogaerts, I mean, that top 4 is insane. You could put it up against any top 4 in baseball, and they are awesome. So I was just like thinking about that recently. I'm like, the Padres could be really, really good. So just
I do fear, and I wrote him up in my bust column. I do fear that Bogaerts is going to be a 12 to 15 homer guy going forward. But and if it was a 5x5 league, if it was 5x5 league, I just would have taken O'Neal Cruz, who's still out there. But I would have taken Dansby Swanson over Bogaerts. Probably a couple others too. It's just this format. Like, even if he is a 12 to 15 homer guy, he's going to make up for it with a lot of doubles, low strikeout rate, all the usual things.
All right. Well, let's catch people up. There's been a lot of picks since Wander Franco went. Josh Hader with the 3rd pick of round 7. Scott took Xander Bogaerts. Then Jose Abreu, Dansby Swanson, Tyler Glasnow. Chris took Tommy Edman. And then George Kirby just went. So guess what? Another second baseman that won't be on my team because he's on Chris's team. You got Tommy Edman.
Yeah, I was trying to figure out between him and Andres Jimenez in a roto league. I think Jimenez probably a little better, but Edman, even though he derives a lot of his value from stolen bases, he is someone who, one, he's a really efficient base stealer, so he doesn't give it all that much back on the base paths in this format. He's been right around 440, 450 points in this format over the past couple of seasons. And that's generally what you should be aiming for outside of your star players, is like 450-ish points. And so Edman seems like a pretty good bet there. So yeah, that's my thought process.
All righty. After Edman went, mentioned George Kirby and then Brian Reynolds. And I am on deck. Probably should start thinking about what I want to do. I've got 3 hitters. I've got Rafi Devers, Francisco Lindor, and Kyle Tucker, Joe Musgrove, Julio Arias, and Christian Javier. So 3 hitters, 3 starting pitchers. Let's kind of scroll through the positions, see how they're doing here. Catcher looks all right. First base isn't bad. Devin Williams just went, and I'm on the clock.
Third base is a just utter disaster.
Second base, I mean, Jimenez is a better category league play. I'm just going to wait at this position at this point.
Yeah, there's a single third baseman left who scored more than 400 points last season.
Yuck.
There are 12 first basemen left who reached that. Even second base, there are 5 left who got to 400 last year. So that just, third base, if you don't get it early, get it late.
All right. Starting pitcher.
You don't get it at all.
Also starting to dwindle here a little bit. Got some things on my mind. I've been arguing with Scott recently about Adolis Garcia, so I kind of feel like I got to make that pick and kind of put my money where my mouth is. He's the last pick of round 7. He's my second outfielder, joining Kyle Tucker. I'm debating. Do I want to make the fun pick or do I want to make the smart pick?
It's fun, a live mock draft. It's always fun.
Fun, smart. All right, let's make the fun pick. I know I have Teoscar Hernandez ranked ahead of him, but come on. Let's say Corbin Carroll with the first pick of round 8.
I was eyeing him.
Get out of here.
Fills up my outfield now. I've got Tucker. I've got Adolis Garcia. I've got Corbin Carroll. Don't have to worry about that. There's a few more first basemen that I like, so I feel like I could wait at that position as well. And starting pitcher, there was no one that I loved either, so just going to go ahead and have some fun and take Corbin Carroll and hope that breakout is real. I know Towers wrote about the breakout. I know Welsh loves Corbin Carroll as well. So to get him as my third outfielder in round 8, feel pretty good. Like it. After he went, Dalton Varsho goes off the board. Will Smith. All right. So I said catcher looked pretty good. They're all starting to go now. And then Stephen Kwan, which he is a standout in this format, makes a lot of contact. likely to lead off, so you're going to get a lot of plate appearances in that Guardians lineup as well. I think this is an appropriate time to take him in round 8. And Chris, you are back up in round 8.
That I am, and I'm really struggling with what to do here because there's a couple of guys that I want, but I think I can just wait it out and take them in the next round.
Jeez, man.
Kind of thinking about going. No, I'm not going to get another pitcher. That would be dumb.
Let's remind everyone of Chris Towers' team.
I'm going to aim for some upside here. I'm going to take a catcher, and it's going to be Salvador Perez, who I'm hoping can get back on track after a little bit of a down season. I mean, I struggle with it because last season looked more like his career than 2020 and 2021 did. So it might just be that this is who Salvador Perez is. But, the quality of contact metrics were still so good that I think if you're looking at the remaining catchers, there's plenty of upside left. Adley Rutschman and the Contreras and Alejandro Kirk. But I think Salvador Perez is probably the highest upside guy, except for maybe Adley Rutschman if he hits his, 80th percentile outcome.
Went right after you.
I do appreciate your plural pronunciation of
that's the appropriate pronunciation.
The Contreras. That would be William and with his brother Wilson, of course. All right, so Chris took Salvador Perez. We are in the midst of a catcher run. We've had 4 catchers go in this round. Varsho and Smith earlier. Chris took Salvador Perez. Adley Rutschman went 1 pick after. And, Adley could just be tremendous in this format. Even if he doesn't hit for power, he hits a lot of doubles. The plate discipline's really good. He walks a lot. He's going to get on base. And I think you get a plate appearance boost from him because even when he's not catching, probably going to be a DH. So he is just all around really, really good in this format. Tony Gonsolin, Byron Buxton went. And Scott, you were up. I heard a bunch of sighs when all these catchers were going.
I was laughing.
Right? You want to talk?
I know, like I said, the catcher run's not going to happen. It's going to be a shortstop run, and it was just the opposite. So I should have taken either a catcher or a shortstop.
It would have been the opposite of whatever you did, Scott.
They're listening.
I'm going to take Kirk. He's the last catcher in that tier with Rutschman and Perez and, Will Smith, a few others. And I think this is a better format because, he walks more than he strikes out,
Mm-hmm.
If it was a categories league, I probably would have passed up catcher here and waited for either one of the Contreras brothers or Sean Murphy. And I still thought about it, but with time winding down, I went ahead and made the move for Kirk, the last guy in a tier.
Murphy's tough because they really are going to keep Travis d'Arnaud, it looks like. And Murphy on a per game basis was not great last season. Obviously, getting away from Oakland should help, but he was really a volume play last year. I think he played 148 games or something crazy. So
yeah, but he's going to get the volume. I think they love his defense so much. That was the main reason they acquired him. Travis d'Arnaud not great at throwing out base runners. That's going to be a much bigger issue this year. I worry about d'Arnaud's playing time. I don't worry much about either their playing time because it's not like they have a dedicated DH, but I worry about d'Arnaud's significantly more than Murphy's.
Yeah, Chris, I think there's a little push and pull. I agree with you that he's not going to get the same level of plate appearance volume from last year. He had the most plate appearances among catchers last season. Sean Murphy did, but he's going to be better on a per game basis.
That's the assumption. Yeah, that's what you have to hope for.
All right, so after Scott took Alejandro Kirk, Nick Lodolo, Starling Marte, Welsh, you're on the clock. I know you like Lodolo, so were you eyeing him as one?
Yeah, I was like, all right, a little bit. I'm gonna go first up with, if I can get it going here, Chris Bassett. Again, this is innings eating, trying to get wins. And I almost thought about doing this. I am going to take one because we have to fill this RP spot. And I almost double tapped. I was going to double tap Presley and Romano, 400 projected plus closers. Because also in this format, there's not a lot of sneaky. Sometimes we get the sneaky starting pitchers. There's not a lot of these guys, and they're not really projected if they are, regardless of the point. So I'm going to go with, I don't think you really could go wrong either way, but I'm going to go with Ryan Presley just because we have to fill those up. Someone in the chat said, starting pitching wins points leagues. I still kind of go by that motto, but I have to get these spots, and there's an advantage on getting some of the top end closers that we're not afraid of their jobs. So I'll take Ryan Presley for some points here.
And I think that's an interesting pick too, because I'm not usually one to take an elite closer in a head-to-head points league, but the Spark class this year, starting pitchers that you can use at the relief pitcher spot, it is terrible. There's Spencer Strider, and then not much else. Hunter Brown is a spark, but we're not even sure that he's going to be in the opening day rotation. And then after that, you just get into pitchers that frankly aren't very good. So
Yusei Kikuchi, that's like the best one. Like the best one is like Yusei Kikuchi that you can get. And it's, there's some other formats where there's a few other guys. Jeffrey Springs qualifies in some places, but I just feel compelled if I can get an advantage at this spot this late in the draft, around 100, I think it's okay. If they had both gone, I'd have just moved on and I probably would have double tapped. There's also a player I really want coming back later, but it's not the happiest pick I've ever made because I want to keep stacking pitching, but I've only got one more starting SP spot after Bassett. I've got Kershaw, Bassett, McClanahan, and Verlander, which I'm very happy about.
But I think specifically this year, Welsh, it's a smart idea to get at least one elite closer because, again, those dry up really fast. And then we get into territory of the Mariners guys where we don't know exactly who the closer is. I think you want at least one set closer on your team.
Look at the list right now. How many would you say are definitive jobs right now? I mean, even Helsley, we love. That's not definitive. Romano, Iglesias, Batista. That's about it. Like really like definitive. You feel good about it. Kenley Jansen. Okay, 4. There's like 4 jobs that are not going to really be pressed at this point.
After the Welsh took Ryan Presley, Andres Jimenez finally goes off the board here in round 9, and then Seiya Suzuki, and Scott is back up. Let's take a look at Scotty's team, see how he's doing. His last pick was Alejandro Kirk, so he's got a catcher, got Jose Altuve, Austin Riley, Xander Bogaerts, Juan Soto, and you're stacking up those Padres. Seems like a good idea, Scotty. Kevin Gossman, Max Fried, and Tristan McKenzie. What next?
I am struggling. Because there's 3 guys who I think are really important to take right now. And I can't take all 3, and 2 of them probably aren't going to get back to me. I'm going to take the one at the scarcest position, one I've neglected for far too long now. I'm going to take Chris Bryant for my outfield.
Over Teoscar Hernandez, huh, Scotty?
Yeah.
Wow.
The scoring format being the reason why. Hernandez strikes out a lot. Bryant is, same thing I've been saying for most of my picks. A lot of walks, keeps the strikeouts low. Yeah. And, the Coors Field factor in between injuries, and he spent a lot of time injured last year, obviously, but in between injuries, he did look very productive in that environment.
The only problem, Scott, is that you might need to donate your foot to Chris Bryant at some point throughout the season. So
I will say this is the format. Like if you're going to be scared of injuries, this is the format to be less scared of injuries because, I wanted to point that out when Raymond took Starling Marte at 95 because Starling Marte, I mean, the production on a per game basis continues to be excellent, like 3.3, 3.4 points per game. That's really good. And it's just, you're probably going to be 30 to 40 games without Starling Marte, but there's going to be someone you can slide into your lineup who's going to be productive at outfield in a format where at most 36 or at most 40 something outfielders are started.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I mean, again, the shallower the league, the better the replacement value is. One thing I'll point out, you don't want to load up on too many Rockies players in a head-to-head league because you need weekly consistency, and those weeks where they're on the road, if you have multiple Rockies, I mean, you could be getting single-digit points that week from your Rockies hitters. So just keep that in mind. Chris Bryant is a little bit better than like the CJ Crones or the Brendan Rodgers of the world, but just keep that in mind.
I mean, we know he's a good hitter even away from Coors Field. Not that there won't be that carryover effect still now that he's there, but I mean, there aren't many. Surprisingly, there aren't a lot of Rockies hitters worth drafting this year, especially in a format this shallow.
That's not that surprising.
I think I saw somewhere that they are one of 3 or 4 teams that don't have a player being drafted inside the top 100 ADP. So
that sounds right.
Who's the other team? Did you say there's another team or they're the only?
Yeah, there was multiple. The Reds are one of them. I apologize. I forgot who sent the tweet out, but I thought it was pretty interesting. Actually, I think it was Derek Van Riper. He mentioned it on a podcast recently. The Twins were close. I think Buxton is just inside the top 100, but
the Reds are kind of close with Lodolo and Hunter Green too. Just throwing that out.
Yep. After Chris Bryant went, we see Dustin May, Jordan Romano, Jordan Montgomery. Chris took Christian Walker. Teoscar Hernandez, I think, a great value at this point. Same thing with Nestor Cortez. I mean, we saw a run where pitchers were just getting way pushed up the board in round 6 and 7, and now some of these guys slipped a little bit further. So I do like the value on Nestor Cortez. Chris, talk to me about Christian Walker as your starting first baseman.
I thought about taking Nestor Cortez like 2 or 3 rounds ago. So I was hoping he would make it back to me. It kind of came down to whether I thought Walker or Cortez would get back to me. But look, Walker hit 470 points in this format. He did play 160 games. You can't exactly expect someone to play 160 games every year, but I really liked what we saw from him last season. The improvements that he made in his strikeout rate, the quality of contact was still excellent. And, we saw in the second half, especially the first half, he was someone who we kept talking about. Things are going to get better for him. Things are going to get better for him. His expected stats were a lot better than what he actually had. And things got a lot better for him in the second half. I think he hit 280 something in the second half. I don't think he's going to do that for a full season, but if he manages to hit 260, I think the production could be very good across the board.
All right, so I am going to double tap starting pitching here, which would fill my 5 starting pitcher spots. And then we'll see how the rest of the offense turns out. But I feel like because I waited a little bit, I just kind of want to attack it with volume. So now 10 picks in, I have Rafael Devers, Lindor, Kyle Tucker, Adolis Garcia, Corbin Carroll. Those are my 5 hitters. And then I've got, I just picked Lance Lynn and Luis Severino. So at the 9-10 turn to go along with Joe Musgrove, Julio Urias, and Christian Javier. So I don't know. It's kind of an interesting build, but we'll see how it looks.
I knew you were taking Lance Lynn. I knew it from a million miles away. I could see it. And I was looking at him eating innings, even if, the production doesn't fully come back to where it was before. Him being able to eat up some innings and hopefully get some more wins and stay a little bit more healthy is a solid pick, as is Blake Snell. Probably not as popular in this format. You need to go deeper. That's what everybody wants, and that's always a crutch on him. But I still like that, and that team being able to pick wins against a division with the Rockies and the Diamondbacks. And Charlie Morton broke my heart. I'm done. Pitching sucks.
Yeah, so all the pitchers are going. Wells, I just wanted to say, what do you think about Blake Snell?
Oh, man, I don't know. I don't know what y'all gonna do.
That's
My Blake Snell impression.
That's Welch's Blake Snell impression.
I was told I'm going to get told on. Spore said he's going to tell on me to do it, and maybe I'll have to do it in front of him. I don't know.
All right, pitching is going here. Mentioned I took Lance Lynn and Severino at the turn. Then we see Carlos Correa, Blake Snell, Charlie Morton. Chris took Chris Sale, and then Brendan Nimmo and Bryce Harper.
No,
Harper's not a bad pick either.
Probably the right spot for him. Yeah.
Shallower format, you could stash him. The replacement value is better, and then maybe you have a superstar in the second half of the season. So interesting pick there. Towers, Sale wound up as your SP4, I believe, correct?
Yes, he is my SP4. Like I mentioned, I would have taken Nestor Cortez the previous round if he had still been there. I probably should have taken him instead of whoever I took before that. Yeah, I think that's how it worked out. No, Nestor Cortez went after I took Christian Walker. I was hoping he'd make it back here. Yeah, I probably should have taken him. I think he was clearly the best pitcher available in this format, given the win potential, given how efficient he's been. But, Chris Sale, shoot for upside in this league. Like I mentioned with Starling Marte, if you're going to be willing to take risks on injuries, this is the format to do it, where the replacement level is much higher than in a 12-team roto.
After you took Chris Sale, we see Brendan Nimmo, Bryce Harper, Raisel Iglesias. So another one of those elite closers that we feel pretty good that he is his team's closer for the Atlanta Braves. And then Scotty, you jump in. Hunter Green.
Come on, Scotty. What are we doing here? Stop it.
That pitcher run killed me. Lance Lynn was one of the 2 players. Remember, I was debating 3 players with my last pick and went with Chris Bryant. Lance Lynn was one of the others who I felt like I had to have. And he made it another half round. And then I was like, I could fall back on Charlie Morton. I could fall back on Chris Sale. And they all went too. But, Hunter Green normally goes ahead of them. So I'm used to okay, you guys can have Hunter Green. I'll take Chris Sale. And then this time, because of the way it played out, I'm on the other side of that, which is fine. I mean, Green, obviously, high upside pitcher. Hopefully it works out.
All right. So he joins the pitching staff of Kevin Gausman, Max Fried, Tristan McKenzie, and now Hunter Green. Let's check back in, see what's going on. Only one pick happened. Brady Singer. Welsh, we're coming up on your pick here, so we could check in on your team. Hunter Brown goes. I mentioned, he's probably the next best Sparp. If you think he could start sooner rather than later for the Astros, then this could be a good pick in round 10. And with that, Welsh, you're back up.
All right. Well, I put an emphasis on starting pitching, but I do got to tell you, Hunter Green was kind of at the top of my list, not for wins, but just being able to eat up some innings this year, which I think he'll do in big strikeout numbers. 200 projected, I think, across the board is a safe bet. But he went to Scott White. And I think the starting pitching market is very similar across the board. And I have probably 4 or 5 guys that I just don't feel the need to pull them here. But what is not is shortstop. It is about done. It's not great at all. I'm going to go with the power over the contact, and it's my injury thing. I could take Tim Anderson, but he doesn't stay healthy. I'm taking Willie Adames with the big power and a bounce back on contact. And then I'm going to fill out my last outfield spot with a big power hitter. I am taking on a little injury risk, but boy, I don't really feel like I've got a lot of player risk. I do have some injury risk on this team. And this has always been a good points outfielder. I'm going with Giancarlo Stanton. Give me big power with the Yankees outfield of Judge and Stanton to fill out my 3 outfield spots, which is not a great position, as we all know, this year.
Love it. Absolutely love it. 2 Yankees in the outfield. What can go wrong, right? Just need those guys. We need those guys to stay on the field. That's it. But yeah,
What could go wrong?
Should mash a bunch of home runs. Last point I'll make on Willie Adames, 3.01 fantasy points per game last season. That was better than Bo Bichette, Bobby Witt Jr., Xander Bogaerts, Dansby Swanson. So was really, really good in this format.
All done with a really bad average. And, any XBA return is going to work in favor here for this offense. And a lot of positive projections on, the power numbers as well. And we are now in a fall off at shortstop. So I don't know who here, if anyone doesn't have it, but there's Tim Anderson, and then there's this one big name. I don't want to take it away from you, Frank, but people have to be wondering, as I've been thinking about it, like, who's the guy that's fallen? Who's the big player across this whole draft that's fallen? O'Neal Cruz. We are at pick 122, and O'Neal Cruz is not even being sniffed around right now.
Well, you know what? That 35% strikeout rate, that will do it in a head-to-head points league. That was the end of round 10. We just started up round 11. So here's what we're going to do. I mentioned this is going to be a 2-part podcast. So on the audio side, we're going to wrap up part 1, and we're going to come back with part 2. So don't go anywhere. Just jump back over to part 2 in your podcast feed. Welcome into part 2 of our head-to-head points live mock draft that we are doing. We are in round 11. And where we left off, the Welsh took Willie Adames and Giancarlo Stanton. And then we saw Felix Bautista. So again, those elite closers starting to go. We have at most 12 seconds left. And then Scotty is back on the clock. I know Scott just took Hunter Green. He's got 4 starting pitchers. There goes Gleyber Torres. My second baseman is going to be Chris Welsh playing for me this year. So that's going to be great. And Scott, you are on the clock and you're studying. He's in deep thought.
Look at that focus.
Yeah, because one of the 3 players I was talking about 2 rounds ago is still there.
You got to take him.
What are you doing?
I mean, you said you had to have this player, Scott.
You said he was a must.
I've reconsidered.
Let's bully Scott into taking this pick.
Yeah, what are you doing?
No. I think I'm going to take O'Neal Cruz because it's like I got a shortstop already. I got Xander Bogaerts, but it's not like any position is so deep that I obviously have to keep utility spot open for that. And O'Neal Cruz, clearly the upside play among the hitter ranks. I mean, yeah, he's going to strike out a lot, but if he hits for the kind of power with the kind of speed that we think he's capable of, and that we all would draft him in like round 6 of a roto league to get, if not higher, then strikeout rate's not really going to matter. I mean, he's still going to be a must-start Studley player in this format. So I'm doing it. O'Neal Cruz. And
they're coming to get Scott. They were coming to get Scott for taking O'Neal Cruz in points. I want everyone to know that happened. You took O'Neal Cruz. Cops, get him. We found
RJ White probably sent him after me because he has a shortstop spot open still. It's like, what are you doing?
You know, Scott was in deep thought. He was scouting the rest of the league to see, all right, who needs a shortstop? Can I afford to take O'Neal Cruz here? I blame the Welsh because he name dropped on O'Neal Cruz. And as a result, Scotty gets the big upside here in round 11. Next 2 picks after that, Christian Yelich and Freddie Peralta. We haven't talked much about Freddie Peralta this offseason. I think the skills are still really good, but I really worry about the shoulder injury. It's been recurring now for him. He dealt with it a lot last year. It's something he dealt with years before that as well. So just kind of years of dealing with this over and over again. I think on a per inning basis, Freddie Peralta could still be really good, a top 25, top 30 pitcher on a per inning basis, but just kind of worry about how much he's going to be on the mound.
I was thinking about Freddie Peralta because, of course, we all remember the year he had 2 years ago. But then I just pulled up the game log, and oh my gosh, it was so gross. So many 3 and 4 inning starts that are just worthless in this format. And that doesn't mean it's going to happen exactly that same way again. But it's not like his inning issues were just because he missed time with injury. Like, he was a glorified long reliever for most of last year.
All right. After Freddie Peralta, Grayson Rodriguez goes, and Rhys Hoskins. We had a report recently on Grayson Rodriguez. Welsh, I want to get your thoughts on that. But first, Chris, you took Rhys Hoskins. I believe you already have Christian Walker, so doubling down here on first base.
Yeah, that's my utility spot, and I was the clear best players remaining, unless I wanted to go fill in my last starting pitcher spot. The clear best players remaining were at first base or shortstop for me, so it was Hoskins over Tim Anderson. Both of them had down years last year. Neither of them impacts the ball particularly hard, so I do think there's a chance that they were both adversely affected by the deader ball in a way that may stick, but I think there's a little more room for a Hoskins bounce back in this format.
All right. Well, I considered taking Nate Lowe, 3-4 rounds ago, and he's still here in round 11, so I don't have a first baseman. Need a little bit of help on offense. I'm going to go ahead and snag him up. I got some Nate Lowe. And, Welsh kind of talked me into relief pitcher early. I want to make sure I get at least one of these guys that I feel good about the job and the role. Kenley Jansen, I know every year we're waiting for him to fall off, but just continues to perform. Red Sox aren't going to be great, but can we get 25 plus saves? I think so, as long as Kenley Jansen is healthy this season. So that is the 11-12 turn. I took Nate Lowe and Kenley Jansen. Welsh, I mentioned I want to ask you about this recent report that Mike Elias, the GM of the Orioles, said Grayson Rodriguez will be in the opening day rotation for the Baltimore Orioles. We just saw him go in round 11. That was probably around pick 125, 130. And that's higher than we've been seeing him go. So I think we're going to start to see that kind of push up the draft board with a report that Grayson Rodriguez will be in the rotation.
I think a lot of these guys, I think a lot of these rookies we're going to start seeing. Grayson's interesting. I struggle with young pitching in their first year, but how much can they press him? I think 150 has got to be a cap. Maybe they'll tell us something different. Maybe they'll go higher. I think it was like 107 the previous year. Last year was kind of a mixture of a mess and everything like that. I just don't know how they would go too aggressive. So even if he's going to make the rotation, which they're saying would happen, I still don't know if I'm taking him at like 125. But hey, if you might get 3/4 of a fantastic season. Hopefully they manage him properly. This is the type of guy you bet on. I'd rather Grayson than I would Andrew Painter, because Andrew Painter seems even less likely to be able to push if you're looking at those rookies.
After I took Kenley Jansen, Lucas Giolito, Ryan Helsley, Luis Garcia, the pitcher on the Astros. Chris took Andrew Vaughn, Lars Nootbaar. It's probably early for him, but man, if he hits his upside, great OBP, great walk rate. So there's a lot to like in this format. And then Anthony Rizzo goes here in round 12. Towers, Andrew Vaughn, finally back at his usual position, what he's used to, first base. That's what he played in college. That's what he played in the minor leagues. So I think it's anecdotal, but I think playing his primary position could maybe help him focus on the bat a little bit more moving forward.
Yeah, you would hope so. And he does a lot of things really well already. He struck out only like 17% of the time last season. He hits the ball really hard. His average exit velocity was in the 80th percentile, I believe. And so it's really just a case, as with a lot of guys, of just hitting the ball in the air a little more. He does most of the things you want already. So I think, it's no guarantee that he makes that tweak and gets where he needs to be, but I like the chances of it, when you're talking about this late in the draft.
All right. After Lars Nootbaar, mentioned Anthony Rizzo, Jeremy Pena. So another shortstop off the board. Better in a categories league. Plate discipline isn't great for Jeremy Pena. And Scott, you are back up. What do we got?
Yeah, so Anthony Rizzo was the guy I'd kind of latched onto for the last several rounds, hoping to get, and he goes 2 picks before I'm finally ready to pull the trigger. Because Anthony Rizzo last year, he hit only 220 something, but his strikeout rate is so low consistently. He had more head-to-head points per game last year than Matt Olson. You know, he missed time with injury, but when Jose Abreu, Reese Hoskins, Christian Walker, just a really good fit for this, especially since I don't think he's going to hit 220 again. I think it's going to be helped by the shift ban and get maybe closer to 240 or 250. So I took CJ Crone, and I actually do have 2 Rockies hitters in my lineup now.
Scotty, come on, man.
Yeah.
I told you.
Yeah. He was the last first baseman of a tier. If I didn't take him, then I'm looking at Rowdy Tellez or Josh Bell. And maybe that would have been fine. I knew Welsh was coming up and he has a first base opening too. So that's part of the reason why I chose now to take CJ Crone.
Yep.
And we'll see if Welsh ends up taking a first base. Maybe he doesn't. I do want to say the thing I'm kicking myself over the most, and there are several things I'm kicking myself over, but the most is that Alejandro Kirk pick, because how many rounds ago was that? And still the Contreras brothers and Sean Murphy are there.
Yeah. Chill. Oh, I'm up.
No name dropping. No name dropping.
I mean,
I still need a catcher.
It's important for breaking down the draft.
It is. Absolutely.
Like in these one catcher leagues, I just have to resist the temptation to go for the catcher, whoever it is, because there's just so many quality. Like if you believe in William Contreras, like he might last till the last 4 rounds of the draft, you know?
Scott, you're exactly right. And I know you regretted taking Real Muto in our recent head-to-head categories mock. It was a 1-catcher league. And I think MJ Melendez was still there in round 18. Welsh, I hopped on the In This League podcast recently. We did a 1-catcher mock draft as well. And I took Wilson Contreras. And then I think, 5-6 rounds later, Sean Murphy went. So I regretted it too. And that's why I'm just kind of waiting on catcher, and I'll see whoever falls to me. With that being said, you just took Wilson Contreras.
Yeah, no, I've been staring at that for a while.
Yeah.
The first base thing is, it's been on my mind. You guys have covered a lot of it. I understand Util can go. I just don't think there's a big separation. There's still a couple names. Wilson Contreras, William Contreras, and Sean Murphy are kind of what's left. And Wilson Contreras is literally at the top of my board. I wanted Jeff Springs. I was like, where is he on my queue? And he went, and I didn't see that he went to this last round. And I was super disappointed because that was going to be my pick. I am going to do what I said before, and I'm going to go with one more. I'm actually having a little bit of regret on my Ryan Presley because of kind of like what you guys were talking about with the catcher. Like we went multiple rounds and things just hung out, and Frank got whoever Kenley Jansen like 5 rounds later. So that's a little egg on my face, but Clay Holmes is still out there. So I now have 2 closers on 2 dominant win teams, which if I'm going to do this, that's going to be my strategy for closers. And having a little bit of an advantage there. I got my starting catcher, and I have a handful of pitchers that are not Jeffrey Springs now that I have to choose from. And hopefully there's a couple more first basemen. There's still some decent names, but it's going to fall off pretty quick here. But my roster is coming out pretty nice. I'm happy.
Yeah, and I think at this point, Welsh, if you don't have a first baseman, there's only one other team in the draft that doesn't have a first baseman either.
Yeah.
There's no one that really stands out above the rest. So you could pretty much just wait and see what happens. So
outside of what like Towers, his point, and what's a good point is like we all have util spots, and some of the higher projections are going to be at some of the first basemen, though there are still some quality outfielders. So funny how much we've talked about outfield's not deep. It's not necessarily, but points definitely rises the pool of the outfielders, especially when you're doing a 3 outfield setup like we've got here. It makes it a little bit better, but outfield and first base is probably what's going to fill most of these util spots coming up.
All right, so the end of round 12, the Welsh took Wilson Contreras. The start of round 13, Clay Holmes, and a first baseman goes Rowdy Tellez, someone I've talked about that I like this year. Lost 15 hits to the shift last season. If you give him those hits, it would have been right around a 250 batting average. Big pop, 35 home runs. The only thing, in a weekly head-to-head league, he's not that consistent. So he's going to have weeks where he blows up. He's going to have weeks where he gives you a headache. So just keep that in mind with someone like Rowdy Tellez. Kodai Senga is the next pick off the board in round 13. And Scott, you are back up.
That was my pick.
I was looking at him too. So there you go.
Okay. Well, I need to go really heavy after starting pitcher right now. So is he already gone? Did Pablo Lopez go? Did I miss that?
No.
He is. I don't see him in the rankings, so he must be gone.
Oh, I just saw him a little. He's on the second page.
Okay.
Yeah, he's gone. He went at
pick he did. You're right.
129.
All right. Well, I'm running out of time, so I'm just going to take the top one in my rankings here, which is Lance McCullers.
Lance McCullers, who on a per start basis, he's good. He's just how healthy is he going to be? That's always the question for Lance McCullers. Last season, the swinging strike rate was still good for Lance McCullers. Lots of strikeouts, but also lots of walks, but on a good team. So that helps as well. After Lance McCullers, Ty France. So another first baseman off the board. I don't know, Welsh. Maybe you should have taken a first baseman. Rowdy
there goes Jake McCarthy. Great. Thanks,
Uh-oh.
Jake
Jake Cronenworth is gone. Jose Barrios, we spoke about on yesterday's podcast. What's the likelihood of Barrios bouncing back? He was always a head-to-head point standout. Gives you lots of innings, quality starts usually. So maybe not the best stuff, but he usually does give you a lot of volume, and that definitely helps in this format. Chris Towers is back on the clock in round 13. Let's take a look at that team, see what we got, Chris.
Yeah, I've got the holes right now in the starting lineup are 2 relief pitcher spots, starting pitcher, and third base. Third base, no. So I'm just going to pass right on by that. I'm thinking about a relief pitcher. I don't love the options here, but I'm going to go with one of the few guys who still has, I think, a very good chance to be his team's primary closer. I would probably rather have a better pitcher in a roto league, but Daniel Bard, who was very good last season, saves matter a lot more than the quality of the pitcher in this format. So,
yeah, look, Daniel Bard, unquestionably their closer. They signed him to an extension last year, so he's going to be the guy as long as he's serviceable, which he was last year. The year before, he wasn't. That's kind of the nature of being a reliever, especially being a reliever in Coors Field. There's a few other should be closers for their respective teams. Let's see what those guys go as well. And there goes one of them, Camilo Doval, in round 13, 2 picks later. And there's only one left by my estimation. A couple other picks, Matt Chapman. So, Chris, if that was your third base target, I'm sorry, because
it was not
hitting him. I'm on the clock. What do you know? All right. So Anthony Santander goes. Here we are, round 13 and 14. I think it's about time to. I've been playing catcher chicken here. Hopefully, I don't regret it, and these guys just last until the end of the draft. That would suck. But MJ Melendez is my top ranked catcher. That might surprise some people.
Yeah,
I really like MJ Melendez. Last year, he lost a lot of hits to the shift as well. He had a very low BABIP against the shift. He's a switch hitter. Actually, he's a lefty. I just made that up. He's a lefty. He was really good against lefties last year, and I think the rules are going to help him. Also, when you look at plate appearances, I think that he's going to play in the outfield some for the Royals as well. So the combination of those catchers, plate appearances, outfield, DH, I think he's going to play more than the average catcher. So I do like that for MJ Melendez.
Did we?
He said. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, he did say in an interview just like a week ago, Melendez did, that he spent the entire offseason working on agility drills and planning to play the outfields. This is a leadoff hitter that is going to be one of the primary outfielders on that team. So even more reason to like him. He's just very low on CBS's projected points.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I've talked about Contreras and Murphy. I prefer both of them to Melendez. Like, Melendez has to get better to measure up to them. Unless there's a big playing time disparity. I don't think there will be. I talked about how, Sean Murphy, I think, is going to play close to every day. I think William Contreras is going to, too, because, how many good bats do the Brewers have in their lineup? He's probably going to DH a lot when he's not catching.
Is he, though? Because they have Jesse Winker. They have Rowdy Tellez.
I think so. I mean, I could be wrong. You're right that Winker's a bad outfielder, and so maybe they're just willing to lose the bat sometimes for the sake of defense. Maybe. Yeah. But it could be that, Winker sits against all left-handers and Contreras is the DH against left-handers and starts the catcher against righties. I don't exactly know. But what I'm saying is playing time, at probably as much as in the history of fantasy baseball, playing time disparities at catcher are less than ever because with the widespread use of the DH, a lot of NL teams and some AL teams too, including the Royals, have taken to just shifting their good hitting catcher over to DH when he needs a day off. So that's less of a concern than it used to be, I feel.
The thing for me with Melendez is just what the hell happened? He was so dominant in 2021, and then he was awful at AAA last season. It was only 21 games, but 581 OPS, and then 706 in the majors. That's not bad for a 23-year-old, but it's not great. It certainly wasn't the kind of impact bat that we were hoping for. And so, you look at his whole minor league career and you've got 790, 814, 571 OPS in 2019. You have the year off in 2020, comes out, has this massive 2021. And then he, doesn't exactly fall on his face overall, but definitely isn't as good as we hoped he would be last season between two different levels. So it's, you look at the overall track record and the 2021 really stands out. And how repeatable is that? That's the big question here.
Yeah, look, I think it's an upside play for me. I think Sean Murphy and William Contreras are potentially safer options, but given the prospect pedigree with MJ Melendez, I hear you, Scott, about the National League and the DH being there and helping out catchers. I don't think Sean Murphy is going to DH very much for the Braves. And I don't think that William Contreras is going to DH much either. So I worry about those two things. What's going on? Oh,
I think I accidentally, because I heard you are on deck. And so I went and made the pick.
It's peak of the devil that whole time.
There you go.
Contreras is in the pick, which
Wait,
I agree
so what were you saying? You don't think who's going to play much DH?
I don't think Sean Murphy is going to DH very much because they have Travis d'Arnaud. So I think they're going to kind of, I don't know, he's going to DH and then be their second catcher. They still have Marcel.
Right, but why wouldn't Sean Murphy DH when he's not catching? Not every day, but like a lot of the time.
Chris,
I guess it kind of depends on how Marcel Ozuna's season's going.
Look,
right?
it's a busy street down there. What can I say?
Are the cops inside of the room with you? Like, what is every time he unmutes his mic? It's like I feel like we're in like a Bad Boys music video or something like that.
This is gonna be a whole nother live stream that we're gonna be starting to do here in just a minute.
All right, well, I bogged down too long talking about MJ Melendez. Whatever. I like him. Everyone else doesn't really like him as much.
I do. I'm with you actually. William Contreras was one of those guys. Or were you talking about William Contreras or Sean Murphy?
I was talking about MJ Melendez.
MJ Melendez. Sorry, I like him too.
Let's move on from
sirens.
the
They're all gone now.
Let's move on from the catchers and catch people up. There was a lot of picks. I took Jorge Polanco finally as my second baseman, my starting second baseman. I think there's a lot of bounce back potential. He was awesome 2 years ago. I don't know that he'll be that good, but I expect him to be a lot better than last year. Pete Fairbanks went, Ketel Marte, Sean Murphy. Chris took Tyler Anderson. Then we've got Miles Michaelis, Patrick Sandoval. So lots of pitchers starting to go. William Contreras finally. Scott took Jack Flaherty. The funniness with that is that Scott thought he was on the clock. He selected Jack Flaherty, but because he's the commissioner, he actually picked him for someone else. So that's actually pretty hilarious. And then Nick Castellanos and Jose Urquidy. Lots of picks. Scott, talk to me about Jack Flaherty.
Well, like we talked about, I don't remember when, but recently, like nobody wants him anymore. So I guess I'm going to be the one who wants him. Like I was ready to move on as well. But it's just like he's this total afterthought now. And, at the end of last season, he looked healthy. He had that horrible stint in June when he came back too early and the velocity was down. But then when he came back for good at the end of the year, the velocity was fine. The starts were pretty good overall. And I think round 14 is a fine time to, to take him and hope for the best. Like I said, I'm planning to hit pitching pretty hard here for basically the rest of the draft. I still have an outfield spot open. I still have both my relief pitcher spots open, but I don't care about that at all. Like however many dozens of head-to-head points leagues, 12 team or fewer head-to-head points leagues I've played in over the years, I've never once had an issue where I couldn't fill my relief pitcher spots. It just like that's a format where it's pretty easy to find those guys on the waiver wire over the course of the season still. So they might be my last two picks, but right. I'm planning to hit starting pitcher pretty hard here for the next several rounds.
After Scott took Jack Flaherty, Nick Castellanos, Jose Urquidy, and Welsh, you double tap first base, Josh Bell and Ryan Mountcastle.
I'm very happy with what was left, what I could do here. Josh Bell obviously struggled when he got moved over, but this is a non-big strikeout guy at first base, which you're going to like. This is a guy that's had at least the last 2 years had a sub 20% K rate. Batting average, Bat X actually has it right around where he was last year. Hopefully I get more homers. Hopefully there's more RBI opportunities, especially hitting in the middle of that Guardians lineup that's also going to be aggressive at the top. So I like a bounce back for him and the double-digit walk rate. Ryan Mountcastle doesn't play as well in this format. Had, I believe it was the highest expected home run total taken away from him. Obviously, that has to do with the dimension change, but also there's a lot of good hard hit numbers under him. And I think there was a lot of bad luck that was placed in that as well. So there's maybe not much you can do if you're going to have a total suppression. I believe 3 of the top 10 expected home run losses came from Orioles this past year. Trey Mancini, before he got traded, Anthony Santander, and Ryan Mountcastle. So there's kind of a trend you can see. Obviously, the dimensions hurt, but I think Mountcastle's got more power to boot. Bat X is projecting him for more power in even less games and a little bit of better batting average. So, hey, I missed the position, but I filled my util, and I got Josh Bell. Josh Bell and Ryan Mountcastle for util in first. I could have done a lot worse because now it's bad. I mean, there's 1 or 2 guys. Brandon Drury went after me. That's what tells you where we're at.
I think Josh Bell is perfectly fine in this format. I wish I had passed up CJ Crone. You know, if I knew Josh Bell was going to be there, how many rounds later?
Yeah, a lot.
Because you know, I put a bigger gap between them in 5x5 scoring. Yeah, 3 rounds later. 3 rounds later, you get Josh Bell. So, like, I feel like your draft, Chris Welsh, you've like been able to maximize value with a lot of positions, with second base with Albies in round 4, Bregman at third base, Josh Bell now, Wilson Contreras when you got him. Like, that is how you win. I've tried to do that. It hasn't worked out for me. I've kept falling a pick or 2 short of getting the guy in the ideal spot.
And I appreciate the compliment. One of the things to point out, I think that's pretty apparent, especially in this format, is these wheels and how important these wheels are going to be. Someone said it in the chat before we even started up the show that they thought that Frank or I was going to win this if there's a mock draft, the mock draft champion. It's just because of the advantage we kind of get of maybe not even falling into things falling to us. We can start trends. And I think obviously knowing what you're doing in points leagues and having a strategy coming in is the most important, but the wheels help. The wheels have definitely helped, and I've benefited from some things happening my way.
That's interesting that you say that, because I always felt like for the way I draft, which is according to tiers, trying to jump on a position before the drop off, which I feel like you've done a better job at in this one than I have. Like, I feel like it helps to pick in the middle where there's less time in between picks, because when you're picking on the ends, the wheels, as you call them, like, there's so much time in between that pair of picks that
it's true.
You kind of don't know. You have to anticipate, and you often anticipate wrong, or at least I do.
Also, the only other thing to add in, because we had Frank's picks, I know he wants to break those down, is like, this world, the points world is a little bit different than a lot of the consumer stuff that's been out here. Not that you guys have talked about, but just in general, that, finding values and stuff to what people know, like, oh my God, Bobby Witt's in the 3rd or 4th. What's going on? O'Neal Cruz past 100. Like, things are working out and falling a little bit easier in this as people are trying to catch up on what we need to do.
All right. Well, let's catch people up on what we did in this draft. After you took Ryan Mountcastle, Brandon Drury, Jonathan India, Merrill Kelly went to Scott, sticking to his word. He wants some starting pitchers. Edward Cabrera, Anthony Rendon, Garrett Whitlock is someone who does have RP eligibility, and I believe he's going to start in the Red Sox rotation. That's the plan as of now. Chris Towers took Tyler O'Neill, and then Jake McCarthy, John Gray, Alex Cobb, and then at the 15-16 turn, I took Taylor Ward as my utility bat, someone I've talked up as a sleeper, someone I think is undervalued. His ADP is usually around 125, 130. I just got him around 180, so definitely going to take the value there on Taylor Ward. And then I took David Bednar. He was the last one that I felt confident was his team's closer for the Pirates. They're not going to win that many games, but when they do win, it's likely going to be a save opportunity for David Bednar. After that, Brandon Lau, Mitch Haniger, Vaughn Grissom, and Chris. You took does Trevor Rogers qualify as a Stallion? I don't know.
Oh yeah, he's a Stallion. I think he was part of the original Stallions group was that was Pablo, and yeah, he's a Stallion. He got a little wild last season, but I think we all like the bounce back potential. I'm actually rewatching Silicon Valley, and I got to the Stallions episode this week. That was a nice little trip down memory lane for me.
After Trevor Rogers, a very fun pick, and shout out to Tim Canick. He does a lot of these mock drafts with us, and he's always all over the prospects and the fun players. And Miguel Vargas, it goes in round 16 here. And we had a report recently that Vargas is likely to open as the Dodgers starting second baseman. I don't really care where he plays as long as he plays. And Scott, did you just get auto drafted?
Yeah, on purpose. It was top of my queue.
Okay, cool. I didn't know if that was supposed to happen or not. But Miguel Vargas should make a lot of contact, hit for batting average. And if he's playing, he should be pretty good. So I like it at this point. Pick 186. Hunter Renfroe, Nathan Eovaldi, and Scott goes ahead and takes Martin Perez. So back-to-back picks, Merrill Kelly and Martin Perez. Two of the pitchers that I told people on yesterday's podcast that you should not be drafting this season, Scott. How do you feel?
I mean, I'm drafting them at pick 189 and whatever Merrill Kelly was, 172 in a league where we go deeper into the pitcher pool than most because of the scoring format. So, they seem no risk at this point, and they were big producers last year. So and like in a way that traditionally we'd look at the strikeout rates and be like, this seems like kind of a fluke. But I just don't know. The world is changing. The world of baseball is changing. And I don't know that this kind of pitcher, the 8K per 9 pitcher, is one that can't work. Though, like we presumed during the juice ball era, it's easier to get outs on contact than it was before. So I'm not ruling out them having strong follow-up seasons to the unexpected greatness of last year.
All right. After Martin Perez, Tyler Stevenson, Eugenio Suarez, and Welsh, you took a starting pitcher, someone I know you like quite a bit this year.
I do. Yeah, I took Andrew Heaney, who the injuries don't work in the favor. And I loosely say, it's like a DeGrom type of light. He's obviously not, but, he doesn't play games like him, and he has a higher points per game like him, which is works in favor. I love the high K per 9 stuff. I love the opportunity at wins here. It's a good defense offense surrounding him. So I'm with that. And I was going to take another pitcher. I don't like any of them. One of the hitters I still love. I'm getting a little bit of flexibility. I'm going to put on my bench, though I probably would stack more pitchers on the bench. Jose Miranda. Jose Miranda does not strike out, makes fantastic contact, 20-plus home run hitter, going to hit higher in this lineup, most likely, with Minnesota. And he qualifies at first and third. And third base kind of stinks. So having this type of versatility on my team with Alex Bregman, who's banged up a little bit, though I want more pitchers on my bench, he is like the prime example of a type of guy that I want to have as a reserve here, especially in this format, because his skill set works better even in points.
All right. That is the beginning of round 17. And after Jose Miranda, we saw Aaron Ashby and Alexis Diaz. I clicked on Ashby's name here just to see if he was relief pitcher eligible, but he is not. So, all right, just, one guy I thought was a spark, but isn't, unfortunately. Scott, you're back up. Are we going with another pitcher?
I think so. It might be the last one I take. I'm weighing a couple other options, but we're kind of running there's one pitcher left. I have him as a breakout this year, one that I can actually get excited about, and it's my second to last bench spot. So yeah, I'm gonna say this is my last starting pitcher I'll take, and it's Reed Detmers.
I like Reed Detmers, and I thought about taking him too, Scott. The one hesitation I had was 6-man rotation for the Angels, so you're never going to get 2 start weeks, and that matters in this format. So that's the only reason why I didn't take him.
Yeah, fair point.
But it's so late that if he breaks out the way that we think he could, then he's just going to be really good whenever he makes that one start anyway. So it doesn't really matter around pick 200. After Reed Detmers, Luis Arraez, now with the Marlins, JD Martinez, now with the Dodgers, Tristan Casas, which is a fun pick, good plate discipline, should walk a lot, which helps in this format. And Chris Towers is back on the clock. Chris, do you have a third baseman? What are we doing here?
I do not have a third baseman yet. I've got a couple in my queue that I will probably take, but I am going to go with a guy who I think is being overlooked, and we haven't really talked about him at all, but I think Tyler Mahle getting away from Cincinnati, he's been a 3.71 ERA guy on the road compared to, 5 at home. That's, pitching in Great American Ballpark. I think we barely got to see him pitch for the Twins, but I think the move there could be very good. Remember, he was a pretty trendy pick a year ago. So I think this late, Tyler Mahle is someone I like having on my bench.
I think Mally's an interesting pitcher too. The only thing I worry about is the health. Where
Sure,
are we
yeah.
at?
Oh, man.
I know he dealt, what was it, a shoulder or an elbow last year?
Shoulder, yeah.
Whatever it was significant. So it's something I worry about. We'll have to follow the velocity in spring training to see where Tyler Mahle is at. But he could be a steal if he's healthy. So I do like that call. After Tyler Mahle, Masataka Yoshida, another player who should excel in head-to-head points leagues. Leading off for the Red Sox, should get a ton of plate appearances. Did not strike out in Japan. He was actually compared to Luis Arraez in terms of how little he struck out. So definitely something that should play up well in this format. And two more players, similar to that, Jeff McNeil and DJ LeMahieu. LeMahieu was really good last year until he suffered that toe injury. So
that was one of the third basemen I was hoping to take.
Yeah. All right. I am on the clock. So, all right. Got to stop yapping here and figure out what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to take some pitchers as well. Typically in a head-to-head points league, I'll load up all 5 of my reserves on just starting pitchers and just hope I hit on, 1, 2, 3 of them. That would be awesome. But yeah, why not take a shot and see what happens? So we are in round 17. It's really late. I know he's got the shoulder, Frankie Montas, but I already have my 5 starters. I'll throw him in an IL spot to start the year. And if he returns to form, I could have a top 30, a top 40 type starting pitcher. So you got to wait till May, but I think it's late enough where you can take that risk. And a few other names that I'm looking at here. Ooh, some guys that I like.
Woof. Yeah, you tell me. Who are you looking at?
Well, I can't tell you that.
I don't know who to look at anymore.
Go ahead and take Thor, Noah Syndergaard, who we spoke about on yesterday's podcast. Working with Driveline this offseason, trying to get the velo up. Now with the Dodgers. Last year, if I told you that Tyler Anderson and Andrew Heaney were going to be great on a per start basis, you would have laughed at me. But the Dodgers just know how to work this devil magic, and I'm hoping that they could figure it out with Noah Syndergaard. So I'm willing to take a shot this late in the draft. And Riley Green was the next pick. Someone else I know Chris and I both like as a sleeper this year as well.
Yep.
Carlos Carrasco goes. We've got one more pick, and then Towers is back up. Let's see how many more rounds we have. We have 3 more rounds here. Hour and a half. So if you're still watching us live on YouTube or on demand on YouTube, thank you. We appreciate it. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. We're going to be doing a lot of these throughout the offseason after we finish up our position previews. We're going to jump back into likely 1 live mock draft per week. So the final week of February and then all of March. So we're going to have a lot of time to do mocks and break them down. It's going to be a lot of fun. Cal Quantrill went, and Chris, you're back up. What are we thinking? Time for a third baseman, or I don't know. You might as well just wait till the last pick at this point, right? Why not?
So there's 2 third basemen left who, at least for fantasy, are very much the Spider-Man meme. They hit the ball very hard. They've got good plate discipline. They just don't hit the ball in the air enough to do anything with it. I'm going to pass on both of them. I'm going to take kind of a boring pitcher, but one who I think the recent trade to Baltimore could end up helping him and making him quite relevant in this format, and that's Cole Irvin. I think Camden Yards is just I believe Scott, you used the term cheesy venue for pitchers now, and I think that this is going to be a situation where Cole Irvin could just like fake his way to a mid-3s ERA this year.
Hey, I'm pretty sure he did something like that last year. I don't have the exact ERA, but I think it was in the mid to high 3s.
3.98, yeah.
Yeah, really good in Oakland Coliseum, pitching at home. He was terrible on the road. So going to another park where it should be good for a left-handed pitcher to pitch. So I think it makes sense for Cole Irvin. After he goes, Brian Bayo, if he gets a spot in the rotation, I like it. I think he's sneaky at this point. Marcus Stroman, boring but solid, give you quality starts. Sean Manaea, that devil, he burned me last year, but the Giants do good work with pitchers, and they find a way to get the most out of their guys. So hopefully they can get Sean Manaea back on track. And I've been talking a lot, so I'm going to turn it over to Scott, who's on the clock, and tell us who you're going to take.
Well, I wanted to say Marcus Stroman, we think of him as a quality start machine, but that really wasn't the case last year. He struggled to go beyond 5 innings. I don't have an exact count for you, but the game log's pretty ugly as far as that goes. So I've lost interest in him.
Oh, boo.
Pitcher for the Cubs doesn't help either. But I'm going to take a Cubs player. So I still have an open outfield spot, and I think at this point it makes sense to me to just totally sell out for upside and hope something miraculous happens. So I'm going to take Cody
Wondering when that was
Bellinger.
going to happen.
Yeah.
Yep, it's going to be me. And look, if he's terrible, it'd probably only take a couple weeks to figure it out, and I'll drop him for whatever outfielder is making noise on the waiver wire. It's a 3 outfielder league, so there's never going to be more than 50 outfielders rostered, probably. I think it's not what I want to do in the outfield, but I do think if you find yourself in this spot where you've kind of missed out, just shoot for the upside.
Oh, well, she just crushed me, man. I
got
wanted
you.
to take Jordan Walker too.
No.
That's a sneaky
Yeah.
pick there too.
I mean, that
No,
would have been a good
sir.
pick for me based on what I'm saying. Like, I don't think of him as an outfielder because he's third base eligible right now.
Yep.
But if he
Well,
does come up, it's going to be to play the outfield.
When I was going to jump in, that's exactly what I was going to say. Is it's funny that you mentioned we're in a space right now where it's like, hey, take a guy, doesn't work out in spring training or a couple weeks, you move on. So what better spot than to start taking some high upside prospects? I was looking at Jordan Walker for the last 2 rounds on my list, seeing if I could get him. He's going to get outfield. I think there's a decent opportunity that he gets there. And I talked about Andrew Painter earlier. Grayson Rodriguez went 120. I just get Andrew Painter at 217. If he doesn't work, okay, I move on. But if they really do give him a rotation spot, I'm going to get some starts early on. I cut him later and I get another pitcher in there, but I might get high-end stuff. This is a great command pitcher, 3+ pitches. I mean, it's one of the highest graded fastballs, according to Baseball America. Andrew Painter makes a lot of sense here, and Jordan Walker Jordan Walker was my main deal. I needed Jordan Walker here. So thank you, everybody. Thank you to the Academy. Thank you for everything. I pass it to you.
I didn't name drop him either because I was going to bring up Chris Towers. You don't have a third baseman. And I thought it would be a good strategy to take Jordan Walker first and then just pick whatever veteran to kind of fill in until Jordan Walker gets called up. And that's something I brought up on a recent podcast too. I think it's a good strategy. If you miss out on everything else at third base, take like Justin Turner and Jordan Walker and just kind of double dip. And you got one old guy and you have, one big upside pick. So that's something that I was going to suggest, but can't do it now. So good pick by the Welsh. I do like the Jordan Walker there quite a bit. After Scott took Cody Bellinger, Gavin Lux, Ranger Suarez, then Walker and Painter at the turn. Cody Morris, who Scott has assured us will be this year's Spencer Strider. So thank you, Scott. We all love you for that.
That's official.
Phrasing it a little strong.
And then Justin Turner goes, the aforementioned. Scott, you're back on the clock.
So this is what happens in these 21-man roster leagues is you just run out of roster space. And that's where I find myself. So I want another upside outfield option. Jesse Winker makes the most sense for the scoring format. I do have him as a sleeper, bounce back candidate going to Milwaukee anyway. So I'm going to take him, but it would have been nice to take Joey Meneses, considering he's also first base eligible, and I have CJ Crone there, who I can't trust on the road. Would have been nice if I could have found a way to roster both, but c'est la vie.
Hi,
I would
look at us.
What I really want. Do we both say c'est la vie?
We did. We said the exact same time. We both said say la vie.
Jinx. Okay.
Big fans of the 90s pop group Bewitched, clearly.
Yeah.
Clearly, that is exactly where I got it from. Now I forgot what I was going to say.
Jesse Winker is the man. That's why you took him.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
I wanted Tristan Casas. I wanted Tristan Casas or Miguel Vargas to back up CJ Crone. That was my plan.
Yeah.
But it just didn't work out. Somebody went for them a little earlier than I was ready to. And I think that's going to start to happen more and more. This is kind of the point in draft prep season where it feels like, because a lot of people split their time between baseball and football. And so I start ranking players in October when everybody's focused on football. So the early mock drafts, I feel like I have a research advantage and like I'm dominating all the mock drafts. And this is the point where everybody starts to catch up in their research. And it's like all the things I could get away with doing before I can't now.
Nobody in the history of live mock draft podcasts has gotten upset over not getting Ross Stripling, but that was me. That just happened.
He was on my queue too. He's on my
did
queue.
not get Ross Stripling. Ross Stripling was good last year, man. He started throwing this changeup more. I wrote him up as a sleeper. Again, good ballpark in San Francisco now, Oracle Park. I like it. I like it with Ross Stripling. Couple other picks here. Welsh, I'll get your thoughts on Brandon Pfaadt in just a little bit. Stripling went, Dre Jameson, Josh Young, Braxton Garrett. All right, Chris, you made up for it. because you didn't get
Well,
Jordan.
that was the thought. It was the same kind of thought process. But yeah, Josh Young, and then I'll tap a boring third baseman who I still think has some upside at some point. But yeah, the idea was to, once it became apparent that I was going to have to settle at third base, target one of the upside young guys and then get not an old guy. I don't think. I think the two guys that I'm looking at are not old. So, there's still some room for, one of the two guys who I'm going to take to break out, hopefully. And we'll see who they are.
All right.
But
Nice.
specifically Josh Young, I think that's probably the way to go if you miss out on really the last signs of life at third base for me are the Gunnar Henderson, Max Muncy tier, which is still pretty early in the draft. And if you don't do that, I'm probably just going to wait around for Josh Young and hope that prospect pedigree breaks through in his second chance in the majors.
He struggled in 26 games in the majors, but that was having played 110 games at the minor league level overall and coming back from shoulder surgery last year.
Yep.
Yes.
So him struggling in his first taste of the majors and still hitting the ball hard and hitting the ball well, just striking out a ton. I think there were definite reasons to be optimistic about him, in that cup of coffee.
It's either going to be him or as long as Anthony Rendon tends to last, taking a chance on a Rendon bounce back.
Look, maybe he needs just to start hitting left-handed. He's got a 5,000 OPS as a lefty.
Sure does.
Never forget.
Awesome. That was one of the coolest moments last year.
I think that was my single favorite moment last year. Anthony Rendon wasn't around for long, but he gave us that moment. Batted left-handed.
That's the kind of thing that should happen against position players.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know what I'd love to see? How about for the All-Star game, we just have all the players hit the opposite way and pitchers throw the opposite way instead of having to watch that game and then making it counts this time.
Darvish would definitely dominate that one.
Yeah, that would be great. Have
that
him
dude
start
throws
the game.
85 lefty.
Really?
Amazing.
Gosh.
You've never seen Darvish throw lefty?
No,
Yeah,
I just
that's
assumed
pretty
that any pitcher who threw it their offhand would look like 50 Cent throwing out the first pitch.
No, he throws left-handed on his off days to keep getting work in. And he actually throws pretty hard.
That is insane, but
All
good to
right.
know. Let's see what else happened here. Some other picks: Braxton Garrett, Joey Meneses, Whit Merrifield. At the turn, I took two pitchers: Aaron Savali. I know a lot of people are done with him. Changed up the pitch mix last year. He was good down the stretch, so I'm buying one more time on Aaron Savali. Zach Eflin. The Rays don't give out money. They gave him the biggest contract in team history, so just kind of blind faith, hoping the Rays do something fun with Zach Eflin. After I took him, Kenta Maeda, Sonny Gray, Josh Rojas. Chris took Alec Boehm, so he's got that combination, Alec Boehm and Josh Young. I like it. I think it worked out well, actually. Rowanzi Contreras, somebody I was considering, another pitcher who came up late last season and also changed the pitch mix. He threw his slider over 40% of the time over his final 8 starts. So I like to see that for Rowanzi Contreras. Paul Sewald, Trevor Story, which you can stash on your IL spot. And Scotty, you get one of your relief pitchers in Yohan Duran.
I got nothing left to take but relief pitchers now. And so I'm going to figure it out. And this is what I always do in this format. And like I said, it's never like I've gone a whole year where I can't figure out how to fill my 2 relief pitcher spots. Duran could be somebody who holds it from start to finish. He's really good. He was getting the majority of the save chances at the end of last year when Jorge Lopez was stinking it up. And, hopefully he can just claim that role. And if he doesn't, I'll swap him out for somebody else. I mean, before 2 weeks is done, there's going to be a new save source emerging on the waiver wire. And a lot of these teams are already going to have their relief pitcher spots locked up.
Alrighty. I did want to bring up Brandon Pfaadt and ask you about him. Welshie, he went at pick 221 in round 19. But let's just see very quickly who you took here at the turn. Your last 2 picks, you took Justin Steele and Yusei Kikuchi, who has spark eligibility. Let's see if he could do anything this season. Anything.
That's pretty much all that it was. Justin Steele, I love the strikeout potential, him being back in the rotation for more innings. He's been on my queue for a while. Kikuchi's a weird pick, but I did it because if he can return some form, I can put him at reliever, and he might be more valuable than relievers I have, and he's also an SP, so it's like a dual eligible player I wanted to play around with at the end because there's not many of them, and I love Justin Steele. Brendan Pfaadt I also would have taken, even though I took Andrew Painter. I think it's a great pick. It's a good speculative pick, just like the Andrew Painter one, for all the many reasons we've talked about. Led the minor leagues in strikeouts this past year. He's going to be vying for one of those rotation spots. I still don't believe Kyle Davies is really going to get it. So they say one spot open. I think Dre and Brandon Pfaadt could potentially both take those rotation spots. So he was one of the few options that I had on the list. So I liked it.
All right. I actually just saw another spark that's kind of interesting. I'll reveal him at the end of the draft here. Not so that Chris can't take him. I'm not going to allow Chris Towers to take this spark, so I'm not going to name drop him. Other picks: Mike Soroka, Scott took Scott Barlow, Travis d'Arnaud, Jake Fraley, and Chris Towers. You're back on the clock. What do we got? Last pick.
I'm trying to figure out what interesting sparp you're referring
Now,
to.
Is it DL Hall? I'll say a name.
I
No,
see it.
It's
I think
not
I see
Neil
it.
Hall. Nope.
Okay.
Someone
Can I
who's
say it?
currently projected for a starting rotation. You could say it after.
Okay.
Chris takes his-
I'm going to
Is
say
it-
it after.
Is it the guy who hasn't actually been a starter in like 8 years?
Nope. Maybe.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't think so.
Who are you talking about?
I can't
So
say it.
Seth Lugo is presently, I believe,
Oh.
projected to be in the
That was the
Padres
one.
rotation. So
Oh.
that's one. But
What if I
Yeah.
told you that they play on the same team, Chris?
Nick Martinez?
Yeah, Nick Martinez. You look at roster resource, he's their fourth projected starter. They don't have anyone else. Nick Martinez and Seth Lugo are the fourth and fifth projected starters for the Padres this year. You look at their non-roster invites, their minor league system, they've got like Julio Teheran. Yuck. I don't think that's going to work out. So, yeah, I think that there's a chance that Nick Martinez could be kind of interesting as a spark this season. So, just throw the name out there.
Possibly.
And Chris, you didn't take him. You took Aroldis Chapman. Who?
Yeah, I went with Aroldis Chapman. I figure if he signed with the Royals, he's probably going to be the Royals closer. I know that's not the unanimous position, but I have a hard time seeing Aroldis Chapman signing anywhere where he's not going to be given a chance to close. So we'll take the chance there.
Alrighty. After Aroldis Chapman, Ken Waldachuk, I like it as an upside starting pitcher. Brett Beatty, also like it. Maybe he can win a job here in spring training. I know Eduardo Escobar, terrible defender. Liam Hendricks, all right, second to last pick in the draft. You know, obviously we're rooting for Hendricks. Don't know when he's going to be back, but that would be awesome. And I am up. Last pick of the draft, Mr. Irrelevant. He's actually going to be quite relevant at some point this season.
Brock Purdy.
It is Brock. No, it's not. It is Matt Mervis. So calling way
sneaky.
too late. Last pick of the draft. I'll hold on to him for a couple of weeks, see when he could be up. I still think there's a lot of upside, and he is sliding in drafts. So gobble up the value on Matt Mervis while you can. All right, the draft is in the books. Got like 10 minutes left. Whatever. We're almost 2 hours in at this point. Why not? Let's just recap our teams real quick, and we'll start off with the Welsh because he was picking first. We'll go in order here. And Scott White, thanks everyone. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Sorry.
And let's run through the Welsh's team. We'll start off with the offense here. Wilson Contreras, Josh Bell, Ozzie Albies, Alex Bregman, Willie Adames. And then in the outfield, we've got Giancarlo Stanton, Aaron Judge, Randy Rosarena, and Ryan Mountcastle at utility. The pitchers, Justin Verlander, Shane McClanahan, Clayton Kershaw, Chris Bassett, and Andrew Heaney. Your closers, Ryan Presley and Clay Holmes. Welsh, what do you think about your team? Anything you would do differently?
I mean, I'm pretty happy with the construction. You could maybe look at some strikeout issues. If you go to Adames, Stanton, Judge, throw out there Rosarena, Mountcastle. That might hold me back, but I got a lot of power. I got some on-base guys. I don't feel like I have a lot of weaknesses as far as my my hitting goes. I got some great values, like we talked about, like Scott said earlier. Pitching, again, I feel really strong about it. I'm very big on Shane McClanahan. I know some other people aren't, and being able to double tap those guys. I was a little weary about the relief pitching and the investment that I did, but I think it came out great. I got two high-end team closers that are going to get a lot of opportunities. I took a lot of risks on a bench, so if we were running a projection system, it might ding me for Walker and Painter, but this is the type of risk, who cares about projections? This is the type of risk that you want on the bench. And if this works out, I could have a frontline type of prospect rotation starting pitcher out of Andrew Painter, and Jordan Walker is great for this format. He's not a big power bat that's a big strikeout guy. So I'm pretty happy. I could probably go back and find a few things that I would have rather done, and not to be all, ooh, love my team, but I really like this
No, it's
construction. I
fine
would
to
like
like.
to go down with it.
You should you should like your team. That's how I feel about
Hopefully.
it. I am a little surprised how bipolar your pitching staff is, because Verlander and McClanahan at the top, great. Like,
Yeah.
obviously, there's nothing to complain about there. But then the next three: Kershaw, Bassett, Heaney, filling out your starting five. So
I got a little too confident in the top end and let it slip a little bit, and I agree with you. And that's where, like, I could have maybe not taken Presley and taken another starting pitcher. I kind of think I would rather do that's the best one. Take out Presley, give me a closer later, and put in another SP.
And I think the, like, I don't know if you want to call it hero SP or pocket aces, whatever. I think that probably works a little better in Roto, where you have those two anchors to anchor your ratios, to anchor your ERA and WHIP, and give you a bunch of strikeouts. And then it's easier to take some chances, I feel like. Whereas in this, I mean, one, just the smaller rotation means that every piece is so much more important. But also just like, because it's a volume thing, it's harder for those, 130 inning, great ratio, great strikeout guys to be like as impactful.
Like,
But
I'd rather have 9 number 3 guys in a points league, I think, than 2 number 1s and 7 number 5s.
And I guess you could argue Heaney and because I was going to say, I mean, Bassett's not that, McClanahan's not that, Verlander's not that, but you could argue Kershaw and Heaney are those theoretical like 130 to 150 inning pitch guys that I might stack some wins. But yeah, it's a good point.
Alrighty, let's slide over to Scott's team. He was drafting 4th overall in this draft, and he finally pulled it off. He got an outfielder with his first pick. He got a third baseman in the second round, and then a second baseman in the third round. That wasn't confusing at all. At catcher, we've got Alejandro Kirk. Then we've got CJ Cron, Jose Altuve, Austin Riley, Xander Bogaerts. And in the outfield, Chris Bryant, Cody Bellinger, Juan Soto, O'Neal Cruz at utility. The pitchers, Kevin Gausman, Max Fried, Lance McCullers, Tristan McKenzie, Hunter Green, and the relievers, Scott Barlow and Yohan Duran. Scott, I've got to say, it's just very different to see your team like this compared to years past, all the other mock drafts we've ever done, because now you just got a bunch of like these upsidey, volatile starting pitchers, and I'm not used to it.
Yeah, I mean, Fried and Gausman, I feel like, are still a
Those
stable
guys are
1
safe.
and 2.
Yeah.
And my bench pitchers on my bench are Merrill Kelly, Martin Perez, Jack Flaherty, Reed Detmers. So like that's 9 pitchers who I feel like either last year or at some point in the not too distant past we considered, or at least performed like high end arms. So I feel good about the pitching staff. I wasn't sure how good I'd feel as it was unfolding, but after seeing the Welsh's pitching staff, and I'm not picking on the Welsh, I just I feel like I feel fine with this pitching staff. If anything, I look at my hitters and I think those should be stronger, because I filled the weak positions early, and I didn't invest heavily in starting pitching, not as heavily as some other people did. But I see a weakness there at first base with CJ Cron. I certainly see a weakness in the outfield with Chris Bryant and Bellinger 2 and 3. I mean, that's a weak position that maybe I should have hit a little harder early. Maybe I should have taken an outfielder instead of Alejandro Kirk. Like I said during the draft, that felt like my biggest mistake when the Contreras brothers and Sean Murphy hung around for so long after that. If I'd taken, I don't remember if it was like Brian Reynolds still there when Alejandro Kirk went, somebody like that, I'd feel a lot better about my team. And so I just wish that lineup was a little better. Now, first base in a 12-team league with no corner infield spot to fill, that's a position. Like if CJ Cron doesn't work out, I feel like something's going to happen. Somebody's going to emerge, and as long as I'm playing the waiver wire hard, I'll end up okay at first base. Like that's the position where I feel like it's, particularly in a shallow league like this, it's okay to kind of punt on. But outfield might be a struggle, and I wish I had gone heavier there.
So the round you took Alejandro Kirk, Starling Marte was there, The next
thought
round,
about him. Yeah.
you took Chris Bryant. Around there, say a Suzuki went.
Okay, so that was after Brian. So Brian Reynolds. Who did I take instead?
Brian Reynolds went a couple rounds before that, I'm pretty sure.
Was it? Who did I take instead? It may have been Xander Bogaerts. That was the other one where I was anticipating a shortstop run. Remembered it didn't happen,
Yeah.
and I would
Yeah,
have
it
been fine
was
with like
Xander
Willie
Bogaerts.
Adames as my shortstop. It didn't have to be Xander Bogaerts. So I probably should have taken maybe an outfield in both of those spots, and then had like Brian Reynolds and Starling Marte to go with Juan Soto, and still would have had a Contreras brother at catcher, still would have had like a Willie Adames at shortstop, and that I would have felt great about that.
Yeah, you could have done Reynolds, and then there actually wasn't another shortstop taken for like 2.5 rounds. It was Carlos Correa.
And
It's
Scott,
not that different from Xander Bogaerts.
Yeah.
I guess there's a durability thing there, but
Scott, you took O'Neal Cruz as your utility bat, so you could have just taken Brian Reynolds and then
Yeah.
O'Neal Cruz as your starting shortstop.
I mean, Cruz might not work out. He was only 2.64 points per game in this format last year because of all the strikeouts and because it took him a while to really get going. But yeah, if he does live up to his upside, then of course he could have been my starting shortstop. Sure.
And if you did that, you would have had 2 starting Pirates in your lineup. So I don't think you want that. That's probably not the best way to go. Let's take a look at Towers' team. By the way, I think I heard that automatic cat feeder, right?
So it's a new automatic cat feeder, and this one dispenses vertically. So it's a whole different, it sounded like sonic rings. We can record a message. So, we have that to look forward to.
Yes.
If we want to come up with a jingle for my cat feeder.
So when it drops, it'll just be like, "Hello, my baby. Hello, my
Yeah,
dog," like
you can
that.
record
Okay.
whatever you want. You can just have you can just, come up with like a, "Hey cats, it's time to eat."
We should just have a Scott saying, Soldier Boy. And then that could be for your cat. Any hoodles, let's take a look at Towers' team here. Salvador Perez at catcher. Then we've got Christian Walker, Tommy Edman, Josh Young, Trey Turner. In the outfield, Cedric Mullins, Luis Robert, Andrew Vaughn, Reese Hoskins at utility, Chris Sale, Tyler Anderson, Carlos Rodon, Dylan Cease, Corbin Burns, stacked pitching staff, Daniel Bard at reliever, also along with Aroldis Chapman, and you have Alec Boehm on the bench, so you can kind of rotate Boehm and Josh Young as your starting third baseman. All right, what do you think about your team, Chris? And what would you do differently, if anything?
The offense feels particularly weak pretty much across the board. I think that's part of the issue. I did go with 3 starting pitchers in my first 4 picks. It's not a terrible situation to be in, and given the way the shallowness of this league is, you might be able to make it work. But just
it
when you
looks
went
better
through
than
the
I thought
lineup.
it would. It looks
Yeah.
better than I thought it would with how you
thinking the
started
same
pitching.
thing.
It's not like it's definitely lacking that like stud bat. And then third base is a gaping hole that you may never fill, because I had that happen in a couple of these head-to-head leagues last year. But it could have been worse, definitely.
Yeah.
Keep going. I didn't mean to interrupt.
Yeah, no, they're and the bats. I think specifically in the outfield with Robert and Vaughn, I think there's upside worth chasing there. So if 1 or 2 of those guys hits, I think it starts to look a lot better.
And technically, I haven't heard this before, but you kind of went with like a hero hitter strategy, Chris, where you took Trey Turner first and then the 3 starting pitchers after that. Maybe this is the format to do it. Head-to-head points. I don't know.
I feel like if I had been picking 5th and I had been able to take Ronald Acuna or Mookie Betts as my hero hitter, I probably feel a little better about it. Trey Turner's still very good in this format, but it's not ideal to end up with Trey Turner. Is the team better if I take Freddie Freeman there? It might be.
And there's also the shortstop thing, which is something we spoke about, where if you take a shortstop early, just kind of feel like you're chasing third base, for example, like you were in this draft, or outfield, whatever.
If it's Freddie Freeman and Carlos Correa instead of Christian Walker and Trey Turner, it's probably a little better. Yeah.
All right. Well, let's take a look at my team here in the infield. I've got MJ Melendez, Nate Lowe, Jorge Polanco, Rafael Devers, and Francisco Lindor. In the outfield, Kyle Tucker, Adolis Garcia, Corbin Carroll, and Taylor Ward as my utility bat. The starting pitchers, Lance Lynn, Joe Musgrove, Julio Arias, Luis Severino, and Christian Javier. The relievers, Kenley Jansen and David Bednar. And I'm not going to read off my bench because I didn't read off anyone else's bench. So that would It actually kind of came together pretty well. I went through these extremes where I started off with 3 hitters, and then I took 1 pitcher, Julio Urias, and then I just kind of hammered starting pitcher after that, and then I went back to hitter. I feel like the offense probably could be better, but I have standouts. I have Tucker, I have Devers, I have Lindor. I feel good about that.
I think it's the strongest of our teams on paper.
It's pretty. You know what? It's one thing though. It definitely has a feel of like, man, this is the best roto team here. But at the same time, it still really works. So you have some volatility. Adolis and Corbin Carroll, I think, are a kind of glaring hole looking at you, as well as maybe even Polanco. But you set yourself up in every spot. Taylor Ward can fill in if Corbin Carroll doesn't work out. You have a really solid, you might have the least sexy rotation, but I think you have the most lockdown rotation of all of us. Some guys I wanted Musgrove. I wanted Christian Javier. So I like the balance of this team.
So I waited to take my first pitcher until round 4, Julio Urias, and I wound up with 5 of my top 35 starting pitchers. So just attacking it with volume. And that's kind of what you were saying earlier, Scott, where, maybe I don't have that standout guy. I don't have that 1 or 2, that ace, but I have a lot of just solid pitchers. Which
I find, and this is, kind of going back to advice I'd give like 8-10 years ago, but I find that sometimes the like real high end aces can be a hindrance in this format because you always have to keep them in your lineup. And sometimes you're like, man, I got all these 2-star pitchers, but I can't kick out Justin Verlander or whatever. As much as I like playing matchups in this format in particular, it kind of helps when it's more like a bunch of number 3 guys than the hero SP thing.
All right. Well, that'll do it. Our first live mock draft. Lots of fun. 2 hours in. Thank you for everyone who is still watching live or watching on demand. We do appreciate it. Let us know in the comments who won the draft. We went through everyone's team. Let us know what you think, or hit us up on Twitter, tweet at us, and let us know who you think won this draft. We're going to wrap there for Chris and Scott. I am Frank. Thank you all for listening and watching Fantasy Baseball Today. We'll be back again next week. Bye-bye.